Chapter 275. Shen Miao knew how to swim, but in this cold winter of the 12th lunar month, the Wanli Lake's water was bone-chilling, and once one entered it, one would feel that one's entire body was a block of ice, and after struggling to move a few times, one would feel that one's entire body could no longer move. That skinny and tall one was about to jump into the water to fish Shen Miao out, since Shen Miao was the one who knew the whereabouts of the people in the secret chamber. But before he could take action, he heard an inexplicable sound of firecrackers coming from the horizon, and when he looked up, he saw a firework lighting up in the west. The situation has changed. The short one wiped off the blood stains on his face and said, "Retreat. Bring the person away first." The skinny and tall one scolded and was about to jump into the lake when one did not know that the boat suddenly jolted, and one did not know when two black-clad people were standing at the bow of the boat. The shoulders of the two black-clad people had golden embroidered eagle patterns. The short one cried out involuntarily, "Mou army. Why is there the Mou army here?" Before the two of them could recover to their senses, the two black-clad people were already in front of them. A silver light flashed past, and the two of them had a look of horror on their faces before they slowly fell down. In the lake, Shen Miao was still violently churning. From the words of the short and tall one just now, it was not just the two of them alone. It seemed that there was another force behind them, and it sounded like the force was rather large. Shen Miao had an intuition that was beyond imagination when it came to such matters. If she fell into the hands of these two people, she would naturally be able to think of a way to escape, but if she fell into the hands of that force, even if she died outside, the Shen family would never be able to find the murderer. But she did not expect that this desperate jump would actually trap herself in a dead end. Those two people did not come down to save her, and the lake water was ice cold. Could it be that she would die here? Her head started to feel heavy and her ears could not hear a buzzing sound, as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. It was obvious that the light from the surface of the water was in front of her, and she could see the bright lights from the lanterns flowing down the river, but she could not catch it and could not see it. Just when her eyes were about to blur, she suddenly saw a figure swimming over from afar. That person's body was strong and vigorous. In the bright lake water, it was as if a god had descended from the heavens, bringing with him the light as he swam towards her. That person swam in front of Shen Miao and hugged her waist as he swam towards the surface of the water. In such a world of ice and snow, the lake water was bone-chilling, and it was difficult for one person to swim, but it was easy for him to carry another person. When he swam to the front of the pleasure boat, he lifted Shen Miao up and threw her onto the boat before flipping himself up. Shen Miao choked on a few mouthfuls of water and did not get up after boarding the boat. She only pinched her throat and coughed a few times. However, she saw the figure in front of her turn. When she looked up, she saw that the person was also dripping wet from head to toe. There was no longer the playful expression on his face as he looked at her with a frown. It was Xie Jingxing. Seeing Xie Jingxing at this moment, Shen Miao did not even have the thought of being surprised. Those two people were here for Xie Jingxing, and it was assumed that Xie Jingxing himself knew the news, thus he rushed over. She struggled to prop herself up and saw that there were two more corpses in the cabin. They were the skinny and tall man and the short man from before. Two black-clothed men walked out from the depths of the cabin. One of them walked to Xie Jingxing's side and whispered something. Xie Jingxing waved his hand and the two men left with the two corpses. Before they left, they even cleaned up the blood stains in the cabin. Shen Miao did not bother to think who these two people were, as even a fool would be able to guess that they were Xie Jingxing's people. She moved her body and felt that there was no part of her body that was not sore. She had been soaking in the ice water for half a moment and was shivering from the cold. Previously she was thrown by the skinny tall one several times and her back was in pain. The most painful part was probably her calf. She lowered her head and looked at her skirt. The skirt was stuck to her body and there was a flower of blood on her calf. It was mixed with the red embroidery on her skirt and it was not clear. That was the wound that the skinny tall one used a dagger to. Chapter 276. She was so cold and in pain that she could not say a single word. It was Xie Jingxing who walked into the cabin. In these exquisite pleasure boats, there would be some spare furnaces and clothes. He took out a furnace from the wooden box and lit it up with a match before adding some charcoal inside. The furnace burned warmly and the pleasure boat swayed in the lake. Xie Jingxing glanced at Shen Miao and suddenly his lips hooked up. I want to change clothes and you want to keep your eyes open. Shen Miao suddenly closed her eyes. At this moment her state of mind was somewhat chaotic and it was difficult for Xie Jingxing to still have the mood to tease her. One only heard a light chuckle followed by the rustling of clothes and after a moment, Xie Jingxing's voice sounded, done. Shen Miao opened her eyes and Xie Jingxing was buttoning the last button. He had changed into a dark green robe and a white fox fur coat which made him look cold and solemn. A pair of black peach blossom eyes stared at Shen Miao with a smile that was not a smile. Do you also want to change? It was very easy to catch a cold when wearing cold and wet clothes. Even if one were to sit by the furnace to bake, it would take a lot of time to completely dry up. One feared that at that time, she would also suffer from the cold. She had always cherished her body. In addition to the fact that her entire body was uncomfortable at the moment, she looked at Xie Jingxing and said calmly, there are other clothes? Xie Jingxing got up and took out a set of clothes from a cloth bag on the wooden table. He leaned against the wall and said, my subordinates sent me clothes. The current situation is somewhat troublesome and there is no way to find female clothes for you. If you want to change, you can only change mine. An unmarried female changing into an unfamiliar male's clothes. If this situation were to be set out, it would be somewhat of an erotic color. Shen Miao looked up at Xie Jingxing and the smile on his lips was slightly nasty. One did not know if it was really forced by the situation or it was intentional. Shen Miao found that Xie Jingxing really had a special charm. Ever since her rebirth, she faced everyone with the mentality of Empress Shen. Even when facing Shen Qiu, he couldn't treat Shen Qiu as his big brother. Sometimes, he even felt like he was taking care of Shen Qiu. But every time she met Xie Jingxing, his viciousness would always make Shen Miao absent-minded, as if she was not the Empress Shen who had experienced ups and downs, but a naive fifth young lady of the Shen family who did not know the evils of the world. After taking a deep breath in her heart, Shen Miao said, give it to me. Her answer made Xie Jingxing somewhat surprised. He looked at her suspiciously and asked, you want to wear my clothes? Are there any other clothes here? Shen Miao asked. Xie Jingxing smiled and threw the clothes in his hands to her. Shen Miao took the clothes and endured it before saying to Xie Jingxing, may little Marquis turn around. When Xie Jingxing heard it, he sized her up from head to toe meaningfully. Shen Miao's clothes were now wet and stuck to her body. She was petite and the figure of a young female was almost revealed. Her somewhat disheveled appearance revealed a delicate posture that was not usually seen. Xie Jingxing said with interest, a little girl still smelling of her mother's milk would also be shy. Do not worry. His eyes were picky and disdainful, there is nothing and there is nothing to look at. Finishing, he turned his head away and did not look at Shen Miao at all. Shen Miao's heart was slightly relieved and picked up Xie Jingxing's clothes. It was a light green cotton robe and the cuffs were ironed. The material and embroidery were of high quality. Shen Miao subconsciously touched it. This kind of workmanship, most likely only the palace would have such enjoyment in her previous lifetime. It was rumored that the Marquis of Lineage's fortune could rival a country and it was not false. She slowly took off her wet outer and inner clothes and used the wet clothes to warm them on the stove to wipe off the water droplets on her body before picking up Xie Jingxing's robe. Who knew that Xie Jingxing's robe style was complicated and she did not wear it properly? Not only that, the belt was also wrapped around her left calf. Her calf originally had a dagger wound and previously one thought that it was not serious, but now it seemed that the badly mutilated appearance was somewhat scary. The belt rubbed against the wound and Shen Miao sucked in a breath of cold air in pain. She did not sit properly and fell to the ground with a bang, and even knocked over the teapot on the table. When Xie Jingxing heard the movement, he immediately turned back and saw Shen Miao falling to the ground and stepped forward to help her up. Shen Miao was not able to stop him in time as her entire body leaned into his embrace. Her clothes were not properly worn and were loosely wrapped around her body. Her shoulders were slightly exposed and her hair was not dry, making her look somewhat charming. No matter how calm she was, there was a moment of panic and helplessness. It was Xie Jingxing who frowned as he held her calf and stared at the wound. What happened? Chapter 277. What happened? Shen Miao was surprised for a moment. From her point of view, such a frivolous action should have been stopped with a stern shout, but she did not know why. She honestly replied, "Just now when I was escaping, I was injured by a dagger." Xie Jingxing swept a glance at her and took out a porcelain bottle from his bosom and threw it to her. "Apply the medicine." Shen Miao took it and did not speak much as she wanted to apply the medicine. But because at the moment she was sitting on the ground and because she had been soaked in the cold lake for a long time, she did not have any strength at all. Not to mention applying the medicine, it was difficult to even sit up. When Xie Jingxing saw this, he could only walk to her side and hold her shoulders to support her to the small couch on the boat. Shen Miao had lived for 2 lifetimes and was not a young lady who had her first awakening of love, so naturally she would not be embarrassed because of the two of them being alone. However, she was draped in Xie Jingxing's white clothes and her snow-white shoulders were exposed. When the cold wind blew, one did not know if it was because of the cold or discomfort, but there was a layer of goosebumps. Before she could say anything, a warm thing covered her head and directly buried her head in it. Shen Miao shook her head and discovered that the thing covering her body was Xie Jingxing's fox fur coat. That fox fur coat was warm and Shen Miao subconsciously wrapped it tighter, only revealing her small palm-sized face. She looked at Xie Jingxing without speaking and really looked like a furry little fox. Xie Jingxing found it somewhat funny and got up to walk to the other side. One did not know what he was holding, but he squatted down in front of Shen Miao and reached out to grab Shen Miao's leg. "What are you doing?" Shen Miao avoided and asked. "If your injury is not treated, it will fester tomorrow." Xie Jingxing said, "Don't think of taking advantage of me." Shen Miao. This person's words were really too hateful. What taking advantage of him? He even used such a serious expression to say it. Shen Miao simply did not want to bother with him. She said, "I will do it myself." "All right." Xie Jingxing did not say anything further and stood up and leaned against the cabinet at the side like he was watching a show. He crossed his arms and said, "I will watch you." "You do it." Shen Miao bent down but her hands almost could not hold the bottle steadily. Previously, when he was arguing with the other two, he had been thrown by the tall and skinny man several times. His entire body was aching from the impact. At this moment, his hands were trembling. He forcefully opened the bottle, but he almost spilled the contents inside. After struggling for a long time, she finally gave up, but she did not want to admit defeat so easily with Xie Jingxing, so she just sat on the snow-white fox fur and stared at Xie Jingxing without saying a word. Xie Jingxing laughed out and took the medicine bottle from Shen Miao's hands before squatting down again and holding Shen Miao's calf. He casually said, "I am not a good person. If you want to be angry, one fear that you will bet your leg." Shen Miao remained silent. Xie Jingxing held her calf and slowly lifted up the trousers. His hands were cold and slender, and seemed to have the unique calluses of a martial artist. When it was grinding on the delicate skin, Shen Miao had an uncomfortable feeling, as if that piece of skin was also heating up. In the next moment, the cloth that was stuck to the wound because of the blood was suddenly pulled apart, and it was so painful that Shen Miao almost cried out. "The wound is somewhat deep." Xie Jingxing looked at it and said with a frown, "Why did you not say it earlier? I did not think that you would be so kind-hearted." Shen Miao said. She indeed did not think that Xie Jingxing would be so kind to apply medicine for her. With their friendship, Xia Jingxing coming over to save her life could be said to have deep feelings. Such a person with deep thoughts was also not a good person, so Shen Miao could not think of any reason why Xia Jingxing would help her. So this leg injury could only be treated after returning to the Shen residence. Chapter 278. Xia Jingxing got up and picked up the teapot from the small table at the side and poured the water inside clean. He then stretched one hand out of the boat and scooped up a pot of lake water and placed it on the stove to boil. He said, I indeed do not have good intentions, but seeing that you are loyal, one will be a good person for once. Speaking till here, he looked up at Shen Miao and said, everyone said that Shen Xian is loyal and righteous, but one did not expect that a girl from the Shen family would also be loyal. Many thanks to you for not selling me out. He was half joking and half serious, so Shen Miao did not explain that he had misunderstood. At that time in that situation, if she had immediately said that the person in the secret room was Xia Jingxing, those two people would have immediately killed her. Who did not know how to stall for time, but Xia Jingxing thought that she did not say it because of loyalty and to make Xia Jingxing feel that he owed her a favor. Why not? Thus Shen Miao did not intend to clarify this misunderstanding. However, Shen Miao lowered her head and pondered. Even if she really sold Xia Jingxing out, with Xia Jingxing's ability, he would still be able to retreat unscathed. Just now she heard clearly that those two people definitely had companions nearby, but now there was no movement at all, so one could imagine who was the one who did it. After a short silence, the water in the teapot boiled. Xia Jingxing casually tore off a piece of cloth from the corner of his robe and dipped it in the hot water. With one hand, he held Shen Miao's calf and placed it on his knee, and the other hand wiped the dirty blood around the wound. Shen Miao's feet were almost in Xia Jingxing's embrace and she could feel his cold clothes. The material was also cold and stiff, as if his frivolous appearance was cold and solemn. Shen Miao was somewhat uncomfortable and turned her head away, and her toes could not help but curl up slightly. In her past life, other than Fu Xiu-yi, she did not have such intimate contact with other males. Even if it was Fu Xiu-yi, now that she recalled it, it was more of a reluctance. Most of the time, Fu Xiu-yi left her with the impression of a sovereign king. Thus there were almost no males that she had seen in her youth. Feeling somewhat silent, Shen Miao looked for a topic and asked, who are those people? Those people that she was talking about was naturally that skinny and tall person. Hearing this, Xia Jingxing did not speak. He only wiped off the dirty blood on Shen Miao's calf and sprinkled some medicinal powder before taking out a handkerchief to bandage it for her. When he was doing this, he lowered his head and looked extremely serious. His technique was also very skilled, as if dressing wounds was something that he was very familiar with. The lights on the boat flickered, the lanterns of the Wanli Lake were like brocade, shining brightly on his face. The youth's features were unbelievably handsome, and it seemed that in this brief moment of brilliance, there was an illusion of gentleness. Even Shen Miao could not help but be slightly startled. However, this illusion of gentleness did not last long. Xia Jingxing put down her feet and suddenly both hands were by Shen Miao's side as he leaned closer. His well-defined face was in close proximity and his peach blossom eyes seemed to be filled with intoxicating wine as he looked over with a smile that was not a smile. It was clearly a casual action, but it was so strong that it made one unable to breathe. Shen Miao calmly looked at him. After staring at Shen Miao for a while, Xia Jingxing then released his hands and lightly said, "It is not good for you to know too much." "I do not want to know anything." Shen Miao said, "I only hope that you do not implicate me." When the words came out, her heart was somewhat vexed. One did not know what was going on today. Perhaps it was because the matter happened suddenly, or perhaps it was because of the injury that made her feel agitated, but when facing Xia Jingxing, it actually stimulated some of the little temper that was buried deep in her bones. Those random venting of anger, willfulness, and bickering were unknowingly drawn out by Xia Jingxing. "As long as you know propriety, no one can implicate you," Xia Jingxing said. He tidied up the messy cloth strips on the boat and found a long pole to hang Shen Miao's wet clothes on to warm them. Chapter 279. When can I leave? Shen Miao asked. There are people watching outside, and if one were to go out now, it would attract criticism. Moreover, if you stay with me, it would be hard to avoid blaming me. Xie Jingxing's words were still able to anger people to death, so for my innocence, when the boat docks, I will bring you to the princess residence. The people from the princess residence will send you back. Shen Miao was slightly startled. Princess residence? Princess Rong Xin. Xie Jingxing fiddled with the charcoal. She will help. Princess Rong Xin was also born from the late emperor's imperial concubine, and even though she was not as favored as Princess Yuqing, she was deeply loved by the late emperor. Among the children of the late emperor, Princess Yuqing and Princess Rong Xin had a deep sisterly relationship. Princess Yuqing married the Marquis of Linan and Princess Rong Xin married the current Zhuangyuan scholar, but unfortunately that Zhuangyuan scholar died of illness a few years later. Princess Rong Xin did not change and moved back to the princess residence and was a widow for so many years. With Princess Yuqing and Princess Rong Xin's friendship, they would help Xie Jingxing in this matter. Shen Miao looked up at Xie Jingxing. He really thought far ahead. If at this moment the Shen family were to come over and see them alone with disheveled clothes, it would be hard to avoid thinking too much. With the relationship between the Shen and Xie family, who knew if it would become more complicated in the future? For Princess Rong Xin to come forward, it was a good idea. The sound of fireworks came from the top of her head. Shen Miao was originally leaning against the window of the boat, and when she heard the sound, she looked out of the window. In the night sky of the Ding capital, there were all sorts of colorful and bright fireworks. Just like what Bai Lu and Shuangjiang said, the fireworks would not stop tonight. Just now when there was a surge of people, the mood was different from looking at the quiet lake. You like to see these? Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows. I do not like. Shen Miao replied. During the annual banquet of the Ming Qi imperial family, the emperor and the concubines would have fun together, and there would be countless fireworks in the imperial garden. At that time she had just returned from the Qin country, and suddenly there was an additional Mei Furen in the palace. On the night of the banquet, Mei Furen and Fu Xiuyi were drinking and having fun in the imperial garden. She sat in Kun Ning Palace accompanied by Wan Yu and Fu Ming as she watched the fireworks by herself. That was the coldest fireworks that she had ever seen, and since then, she did not like these things. It's just a fleeting thing. What's there to see? Nice to look at but useless. There was a hint of anger in her voice, but her eyes seemed a little sad. Xie Jingxing looked at her strangely, and after thinking for a while, he got up and took something from the cabinet. He walked to Shen Miao's side and handed the thing in his hand to Shen Miao. One do not know how long it would take for the boat to reach the shore. Since today is the Jade Rabbit Festival, you should also make a flower lantern. Xie Jingxing said. Shen Miao looked at the lantern in her hands. Most likely it was left behind by the people who were playing on the boat, as the candles had not been put in and was neatly folded. Looking out of the window, the surface of the Wanli Lake was surrounded by layers upon layers of lanterns. Their boat shuttled back and forth in a sea of resplendent lights, like a ferry in the beautiful Milky Way. Not waiting for Shen Miao to answer, Xie Jingxing made one himself. After he finished making the lantern, he casually placed it into the lake. His actions were also very casual. When Shen Miao saw it, she asked, "Why did you not write a note?" One had to put a note in the lantern, and on the note was the wish of the person who made the lantern, so that the deities would be able to hear the prayers of the person and would bless the person who made the lantern in the coming year. I do not believe in deities. Xie Jingxing said lazily, it is fine not to write. Shen Miao thought about it and was really unable to imagine what kind of scene it would be like with Xie Jingxing's arrogant and unruly temperament to seriously pray for the deities' blessings. She folded the two lanterns but did not write a note and did not put any candles inside. Instead, she lit the flower at the top of the lantern and placed it into the lake. Chapter 280. The two lanterns were burning from top to bottom and looked like two balls of fire on the lake. Xie Jingxing was startled for a moment before asking, "These are the lanterns for worship. What are you doing?" Lighting the lanterns was a lantern for the dead. It was so lively without rhyme or reason, but Shen Miao was actually here to worship the dead. Shen Miao did not care about Xie Jingxing's words and only watched as the lanterns gradually burned until the flames engulfed the lanterns. After a long time, there were no longer any shadows of the two lanterns on the lake. After being reborn, there were some things that could be repeated but some things could not be repeated. For example, Wan Yu and Fu Ming. In the previous lifetime and this lifetime, the meeting was an eternal farewell. In this lifetime, there was no longer that gentle and generous princess or the sensible and steady crown prince. A handkerchief was handed to Shen Miao. She raised her head and Xie Jingxing said impatiently, "Why are you crying again?" Shen Miao touched her cheeks and unknowingly, her cheeks were actually wet. Most likely it was Lu Jingxing's sorrow that she was not even conscious of her tears. Seeing her take the handkerchief, Xie Jingxing said, "You have some loyalty. If there are any difficulties in the future, you can come and find me." The words that came out of nowhere made Shen Miao stunned for a moment before looking at Xie Jingxing. The youth's side profile under the bright lights of the lake was even more beautiful. He leaned against the window and looked at Shen Miao with a flash of complicated light in his eyes. But he casually said, "I do not like to owe people favors. Since you did not betray me today, I will not treat you unfairly. Seeing that you have gotten into a lot of trouble, perhaps in the future there will be a need for me. At that time, on account of today's account, I will lend a helping hand." Shen Miao said, "Then many thanks to little Marquis." Xie Jingxing smiled and suddenly turned his head to look at her. There was some teasing in his tone, but help is help, but you must not fall in love with me. Shen Miao was so angry that she wanted to laugh. She said, "Little Marquis is thinking too much." "Is it?" Xie Jingxing walked over from the window and looked down at Shen Miao, who was sitting on the couch. He suddenly pulled out the hairpin from Shen Miao's head and thoughtfully looked at it in his hands. "Then why are you wearing the hairpin that I gave you?" He deliberately emphasized the word I. Shen Miao was at a loss for words. Just as she wanted to say that it was the maid who put it on for her, she heard Xie Jingxing continue, "Today you have touched and seen me, but forget about pledging one's body." He smiled maliciously, "A little girl that has not grown up yet. I am not that hungry that I cannot be choosy." This person's words were too vicious. You even like to distort the truth. In Shen Miao's past and present lifetime, those that she met were either hypocrites or those that had a look of awe-inspiring righteousness. It was the first time that she met a scoundrel that could anger others to death with just one sentence. "I don't like little Marquis and I won't like him in the future. Little Marquis can rest assured," Shen Miao said sarcastically. "That's good." Xie Jingxing stared at her. The smile on his lips was still playful, but in his pitch-black eyes, there was a kind of warning and indifference. He said, "Little girl, I am not a good person." Shen Miao did not speak. Xie Jingxing was not a good person, but could she be considered a good person? Perhaps in the past lifetime, but in this lifetime, she was sinister and ruthless, and was completely not related to the word good. The boat quietly drifted down with the current and outside the window, it started to snow lightly. Half of the lake was sparkling with snowflakes and the other half was bright lights. The fireworks in the sky were colorful. This New Year's Jade Rabbit Festival did not seem to be very good, but after all it was special. The purple-clad youth leaned against the window and looked out indifferently. One did not know how long he looked, and when he turned his head, he discovered that Shen Miao had fallen asleep on the small table. Chapter 281. When she was asleep, there was no alienation or dignified expression on her face. Because of today's torment, her cheeks were still red, and with Xia Jingxing's slightly large fox fur coat, she really looked like a young lady that had not grown up yet. Her hair was already slightly dried by the stove, and a lock of long hair covered her eyes. Most likely it was a little itchy, as Shen Miao frowned in her dreams. Xia Jingxing walked to her side and paused for a moment before reaching out to tuck the lock of hair that was covering her eyes to the back of her ears. He then took out the jade begonia hairpin that he just plucked from Shen Miao's head and gently inserted it into Shen Miao's head. He crossed his arms and looked at Shen Miao for a while. Seeing that she was sleeping soundly, he raised his brows. To be able to sleep so well in front of a strange male, one really do not know fear. After sitting for a while, the boat came to a sudden stop. It had finally reached the shore. Xia Jingxing walked to the bow of the boat and a few black-clad figures appeared from the shore. The leader said, replying to Master, everything has been dealt with cleanly. Is Master returning to the residence now? Xia Jingxing looked back at the cabin and said, head to the princess residence first. Tai Yi, bring a horse carriage over. He turned back to the cabin and knocked on the small table. Shen Miao sleepily raised her head and Xia Jingxing said, reached the shore. Already reached? Shen Miao suddenly woke up and looked out of the window before walking out. However, the injury on her leg had not healed, and when she stood up, her legs softened and she almost fell down. Xia Jingxing grabbed her arm, and after thinking about it, he stretched out his hand and wrapped the fox fur around Shen Miao's body tighter. He carried her along with the fox fur and walked out of the boat. Shen Miao jumped in shock and subconsciously reached out to hug Xia Jingxing's neck. Looking up, Xia Jingxing's lips hooked up, be more honest. Do not take advantage of me. Shen Miao. Xia Jingxing's hand wrapped around her shoulders. He was tall and had long legs, so it was effortless for him to carry Shen Miao. Shen Miao's head was in his embrace and she could feel his tall and sturdy chest and his powerful heartbeat, making her feel somewhat uncomfortable. When they left the boat, they discovered that there was already a group of black-clad people standing outside. When they saw Xia Jingxing carrying a little girl out, even though they tried their best to endure, their expressions were somewhat strange. The most relaxed one was Xia Jingxing. He walked to the front of the horse carriage and threw Shen Miao inside before saying, to the princess residence. He left without even turning his head back. The carriage wobbled away, leaving the group of black-clothed men looking at each other in dismay. A tall young man said, Tai Yi, why did Master carry a girl out? What is the relationship between that girl and Master? That's right, that's right. Another woman also walked over, rubbing her chin as she muttered, after so many years, how many beauties have been unable to get close to Master's body? So Master has this kind of taste. Her eyes lit up, ha, no wonder. Shoo shoo shoo, who said that? Another charming mature woman said with dissatisfaction, what's there to look at that silly little girl? Has her hair grown out yet? Huolong, I know you like Master, but this, you can't be jealous. The woman from before smiled and looked at the middle-aged man in the middle, Tai Yi, you are the closest to Master. Who is that little girl? What's the matter with Master? Tell us about it. All shut up. Tai Yi, who was standing in the middle, could not bear it anymore, all go back, go back. The people in the secret department are all so idle, tomorrow go and guard the tower prison. When those words were spoken, everyone immediately retreated and said, suddenly remembered that there are still some matters. Just now those corpses have been cleared. It is better to return to the secret department to report the situation. Today was really dangerous. As they chatted, they walked away. Tai Yi let out a sigh of relief before turning back and disappearing into the night. Chapter 282. Speaking of the other end, in the princess residence. When the people outside reported Xia Jingxing's arrival, Princess Rong Xian was already preparing to sleep. She had been a widow for many years and had no children by her side, thus every New Year's festival, she would appear to be alone. Even if Emperor Wenhui in the palace had the title of siblings with her, but after all they did not crawl out from the same mother's womb, so how could they be that close? Moreover, it was better to stay in the princess residence than to interact with the emperor in the palace, so for so many years of Jade Rabbit Festival, Princess Rong Xian would not enter the palace nor go out to play, but quietly stay in the residence, just like usual. Today was different. When she knew that Xie Jingxing had come, Princess Rong Xian was somewhat surprised. After changing her clothes, she then went out to welcome him. When she walked into the hall, she saw that Xie Jingxing was already sitting on a chair waiting. When he saw her, he smiled gently. Rong Yi. Princess Rong Xian's maiden name was Yu Rong, and she had a deep sisterly relationship with Princess Yu Qing, thus it was not wrong for Xie Jingxing to call her Rong Yi. Why did you come over today? When Princess Rong Xian saw Xie Jingxing, she was somewhat puzzled, but there was more joy. She did not have any children and had long treated Xie Jingxing as her own son. She pitied Xie Jingxing's life experience. When Princess Yu Qing passed away, when Princess Rong Xian came to the residence of the Marquis of Lineage to offer her condolences, she even scolded Xie Ding badly. Even though Xie Jingxing was mischievous, he treated Princess Rong Xian with great respect and would come over to the princess residence to pay his respects during every New Year's festival. It was just that normally he would come over on the first day of the new year, but this year he came on the Jade Rabbit Festival, which made Princess Rong Xian somewhat surprised. Miss Rong Yi, so come over to take a look. Will Rong Yi not welcome me? Xie Jingxing smiled. His appearance was outstanding to begin with, and now that he was speaking in a half-joking, half-serious manner, his handsome and romantic appearance caused all the maidservants in the hall to blush. Princess Rong Xian tapped his forehead and smiled. You even dare to tease an old person like me. You little brat, your guts are getting fatter. It is one thing to miss Rong Yi, but there is another matter to seek Rong Yi's help in coming over tonight. Princess Rong Xian was surprised for a moment before she sat up straight and said seriously, Jingxing, did you encounter any difficulties? If there is anything difficult, just tell Rong Yi. Aunt Rong, don't be nervous. It's just a small matter. Xie Jingxing explained with a smile, I have a friend who got separated from her family during the Jade Rabbit Festival and unfortunately fell into the water. Even though I saved her, it was somewhat inconvenient. She even wanted Aunt Rong to send her back in the name of the princess residence. He said it was simple, but when Princess Rong Xian heard it, she understood the matter. Even though Ming Qi was more open to the matters between men and women, but after all, a female's reputation was very sensitive, and if some rumors were to spread, it would be unbearable. But Princess Rong Xian looked at Xie Jingxing. That friend of yours is actually a young lady? Xie Jingxing nodded. It's been so many years, but I've never seen a girl by your side. Princess Rong Xian suddenly mischievously said, Jingxing, you are also an adult. One do not know how old is that young lady, and is there any marriage arrangement in the family? Aunt Rong. Xie Jingxing helplessly said, she is still a young lady. He had no choice but to help her because he owed her a favor. Don't tell me you don't want to help me. What are you talking about? Princess Rong Xian pretended to be angry. Which time did Aunt Rong not help you? Alright. Where is that young lady now? In the horse carriage outside. Aunt Rong will help her find a set of clothes to change into. Xie Jingxing said. Hearing that, Princess Rong Xian's gaze towards Xie Jingxing became more meaningful. When Xie Jingxing saw it, he only shook his head and found it funny and was too lazy to explain. Princess Rong Xian instructed the maids by her side to bring Xin Miao, who was in the horse carriage, to the resident's bedroom to rest, and said to Xie Jingxing, but you have not told me which family's young lady is she from? Xin family of the capital, formidable great general's daughter, Xin Miao. Xie Jingxing lazily said. Princess Rong Xian was drinking tea and almost choked on the tea when she heard that. She looked at Xie Jingxing and said in disbelief, that idiot noble girl. Isn't she in love with Prince Ding? Xie Jingxing shrugged his shoulders. Princess Rong Xian carefully looked at him and deliberated over her words. Jing Xing, there are thousands of young ladies in the world and you are still young. Wait a while more. Xie Jing Xing, 2 flowers bloomed, each representing 1 branch. On one side, Princess Rong Xian and Xie Jing Xing were having a heart-to-heart talk, while on the other side, Shen Miao was sitting in Princess Rong Xian's bedroom, watching the maids coming and going to tidy up her clothes and hair. In the previous lifetime, Princess Rong Xian did not treat her with such enthusiasm. Perhaps she looked down on her self-seeking behavior or felt that her learning was crude, thus she always treated her coldly. Even after she became the Empress, Princess Rong Xian was lukewarm towards her. And because Princess Rong Xian was not in the palace all year round and would occasionally enter the palace, her gaze towards her was not very friendly. In Shen Miao's heart, Princess Rong Xian was not a person that was easy to get along with. Who knew that with such hospitality, it made Shen Miao somewhat inexplicable. Chapter 283. Shen Miao sat in Princess Rong Xian's residence for a moment and changed her clothes before having her hair combed by the maid. After drinking a cup of tea, Princess Rong Xian then walked in. Shen young lady is still all right. Princess Rong Xian smiled, already instructed the kitchen to bring the ginger tea. In such a cold day, warm the body and do not catch a cold. Shen Miao replied with a smile, many thanks to your Princess Highness. But there was some suspicion in her heart. Princess Rong Xian had never been this kind to her before. At this moment it was still that face, but there was not a trace of the previous life's harshness and coldness, making Shen Miao suspect if the person in front was really Princess Rong Xian. When she was thinking, Princess Rong Xian was also sizing her up with a thoughtful gaze. Even though Princess Rong Xian did not like to go out, but the rumors in the Ding capital would eventually fall into her ears. Because she did not move out often, the news stopped a long time ago, which was the fact that the D5th young lady of the Ding capital was an idiot. In Princess Rong Xian's impression, Shen Miao was a timid and weak female who was extremely brazen in pursuing males. She had no talent and virtue and was born vulgar, so how could she match up to Xie Jing Xing, who had superior looks and learning? However, at this moment, the young female's appearance was delicate and her eyes were as clear as water. Even though she was sitting, there was a rare air of nobility and majesty that one could not help but change her view a little. Tonight the Wanli Lake is crowded and Shen young lady was separated from her family. Presumably she must be frightened. Princess Rong Xian smiled, after drinking the ginger tea, Ben Gong will let the servants send you back. Her face had some probing on it. Today you met with an accident, Ben Gong's nephew had unprecedentedly asked me to help. The nephew naturally referred to Xie Jing Xing. Shen Miao looked at Princess Rong Xian's meaningful expression and did not know how to continue the words. She paused before saying, little Xie Marquis is chivalrous and courageous. Today I have troubled you. Finishing, she felt sour at her own words. Xie Jing Xing was chivalrous and courageous. Clearly he had a black heart. Today, she was implicated by Xie Jing Xing, but now it seemed like she owed Xie Jing Xing a favor. When Princess Rong Xian saw Shen Miao's somewhat distant words, it seemed that she was deliberately drawing a line between her and Xie Jing Xing. She felt even more satisfied. If Shen Miao was a person that climbed all over one's face, she would take advantage of Xie Jing Xing's little time and could not wait to show that her relationship with Xie Jing Xing was not ordinary, and pester Xie Jing Xing no matter what. Princess Rong Xian would look down on Shen Miao without saying a word. Although he was happy to see the feelings between a young man and a young woman, he was, after all, from the strict etiquette of the royal family. He really didn't care about private matters. What are you talking about? Princess Rong Xian smiled cordially. Jing Xing, that child also said that you are his friend and there is no need to be so formal between friends. Speaking of which, Jing Xing is Ben Gong's nephew and since you have a friendship with him, it is possible to treat Ben Gong as your imu. Shen Miao held the teacup and almost choked on the tea in her throat. To see Princess Rong Xian as one's own imu? It was when she married Fu Xiu-yi in the last lifetime and Princess Rong Xian really became her own Yumu. Afterwards, when she wanted to curry favor with Princess Rong Xian privately, Princess Rong Xian coldly said, "Never mind. Ben Gong do not have a niece like you." That Princess Rong Xian, who coldly rejected her closeness, now said to her cordially, "It is possible to treat me as one's own Yumu." Shen Miao felt that she was most likely dreaming. Seeing that she was somewhat stunned, Princess Rong Xian felt that this child was honest and did not have the schemes of those noble young ladies. She pulled her hand and said, "Ben Gong do not have any children, in the future you may come over to Ben Gong's place to sit." She took off the bracelet on her wrist and put it on Shen Miao's hand. "Treat this as a meeting gift from Ben Gong to you." Chapter 284. This is too valuable. Shen Miao declined. This bracelet was a sand-sprayed peony jade double ring, and there were a total of 5 gold rings interlocking with each other. It was the dowry of the deceased great imperial consort, which was also Princess Rong Xian's birth mother's dowry. Afterwards, when Princess Rong Xian married, it was given to her. In Shen Miao's past life, she had seen Princess Rong Xian wearing this double ring, and it was enough to see how precious it was. "You can just wear it." Princess Rong Xian smiled, "It is just a small toy. One think that your Shen family have gold, silver and jewelry, so one must not dislike it. How would this official's daughter dare to dislike the great imperial consort's bracelet?" Shen Miao said, "But it is still too valuable." Princess Rong Xian was surprised for a moment. "How do you know that this is the great imperial consort's bracelet?" Shen Miao also paused and secretly cried out in her heart. Because she was the head of the 6 palaces in her past life, naturally she knew all about the matters of the womenfolk in the palace. But in this life, she was a daughter of an official's family and naturally would not know about the imperial family's private matters. Seeing Princess Rong Xian's suspicious gaze, Shen Miao suddenly had an idea and smiled. "One heard little Xie Marquis mention that little Xie Marquis and your Princess Highness have a good relationship and often mention about your Princess Highness." So it was like this. Princess Rong Xian's expression suddenly softened and said with relief, "Ben Gong had treated him as one's own child all these years. It is difficult for him to have a conscience." Speaking till here, the gaze that looked at Shen Miao was different, but he actually told you about this matter. Shen Miao's body stiffened and indeed heard Princess Rong Xian say, "It seems that he really treat you as a friend." Princess Rong Xian sighed, "Jing Xing, this child, even though he looks a little mischievous, he is a good one." For so many years, Ben Gong had not seen him being so attentive to any young lady. She smiled at Shen Miao, "You are the first." Shen Miao secretly said in her heart that Princess Rong Xian's appearance was really like Xie Jingxing's birth mother. But Xie Jingxing did not fancy her because of any romance. One feared that Xie Jingxing was suspicious of her. To deal with such an intelligent person, one would have a headache at every step. Just at this time, the maid sent boiled ginger tea over. Princess Rong Xian was chatting with Shen Miao as she watched Shen Miao drink ginger tea. The more she chatted with Shen Miao, the more Princess Rong Xian liked Shen Miao. She found that Shen Miao was not the idiotic idiot that was rumored to be. Instead, she was very knowledgeable and had a great magnanimity. Even though it was just a simple chat, she did not feel that it was by the book. One did not know how a daughter who was raised in the boudoir would have such broad horizons. Thinking of the matter of Shen Miao being in love with Prince Ding, Princess Rong Xian actually had a trace of worry in her heart. Even though Prince Ding was her nephew, but compared to Fu Xiu-yi, Princess Rong Xian's heart was naturally more biased towards Xie Jingxing's side. Princess Rong Xian also did not wish for her nephew to miss such an outstanding young lady, thus she kept on praising Xie Jingxing as they chatted. Princess Rong Xian's temperament was cold and inflexible. Not to mention outsiders, even if it was her relatives, she would have an ice-cold appearance when facing Emperor Wenhui. But today she was chatting happily with an unfamiliar young female, which almost shocked the jaws of the servants in the princess residence. One did not know that Shin Miao was married to Fu Xiu-yi in the past lifetime and was looking forward to pleasing all the relatives around Fu Xiu-yi. She had inquired a lot about Princess Rong Xian and naturally knew how to cater to her liking. It was just that in the past lifetime there was little effect, but now because of the additional layer of relationship with Xie Jingxing, it was just to Princess Rong Xian's liking. If one knew that Princess Rong Xian was so easy to please, in the past lifetime one only needed to build a good relationship with Xie Jingxing. There was no need to be so powerful. Princess Rong Xian spoke until the time it took for an incense stick to burn before she stood up and said, "The time is not early anymore. If one do not send you back to the residence, one think that General Shen and Shen Furen would be very anxious. Ben Gong had already prepared the horse carriage and will send you back." Finishing, she got up to instruct the servants. Chapter 285. After Shin Miao followed Princess Rong Xian out, she was shocked by the array. Princess Rong Xian's horse carriage was incomparably gorgeous, and what was even more shocking was that there were a group of armed guards. Princess Rong Xian smiled. "There are many people on the streets today. With more people guarding, it would prevent any accidents from happening." The other party had good intentions and Shin Miao had no reason to refuse. Moreover, borrowing the power of Princess Rong Xian's array, it was just nice to punish some of the people in the Shin residence. She then followed the advice and thanked Princess Rong Xian before walking up the carriage. On the streets of the Ding capital, until now, the crowds of people had not decreased. The fireworks were really going to be displayed for the entire night, and on the streets where people were coming and going, a group of ostentatious people and horse carriages would inevitably attract attention. On the city wall at the corner of the street, there was a youth wearing a fox fur coat and beside him was a middle-aged man. The man said, "Her Princess Highness actually sent so many guards to escort Shin young lady back to the residence. Aunt Rong is not a person that is easy to please." The youth said with interest, "This young lady of the Shin family has great abilities." The middle-aged man was silent and suddenly heard the youth beside him said, "How are the people that were caught alive today?" Replying to Master, "They are all locked up in the tower prison. 3 of them were death warriors and had already committed suicide by biting poison. The remaining 3 had their jaws removed and refuse to speak even if they die. Then pick one and crush his bones. Do not let go of even an inch of his body. I do not need to teach how to kill a chicken to warn the monkeys." "Yes." The man hesitated for a moment. "Those that sneaked into the city, find them and kill without mercy." The bustling flow of people in the Ding capital and the restlessness and danger under the bustle could not be seen at all in the general residence. In the main hall of the Shin residence, everyone was standing solemnly. Shin Xian and wife, who were standing in the middle, could not hide their anxiety and worry, and Shin Chio's face was filled with annoyance. After searching for an entire night, they were not able to find Shin Miao's whereabouts. Shin Xian and his wife were not fools and knew that in this situation, most likely she was not kidnapped by kidnappers. Who would not care that the Shin family's guards were just a few steps away to forcefully kidnap Shin Miao? Normal kidnappers would not take such a big risk, and they were afraid that someone was seeking revenge. Shin Xian and wife did not know about the matter of Prince Yu residence, but Shin Chio was well aware that the extermination of Prince Yu residence most likely had something to do with Shin Miao. If it was the remnants of Prince Yu residents who had the heart to take revenge for their master, one could imagine the result of Shin Miao falling into their hands. Shin Xian even mobilized the Shin family's army and secretly informed the city's garrison to guard the city gates. They could not be found even after going from house to house in the Ding capital. As time passed, Shin Xian and the few of them almost went crazy. Chen Roqiu opened her mouth gently. "Eldest brother and eldest saw, this matter is not a solution." "Why not?" "It is better to report to the authorities." "If it is reported to the authorities, it would be better if the capital administrator came forward." "It is not a solution for us to search like this." "Correct." Shen Wan also opened his mouth. "Eldest brother, the longer this drags on, the more disadvantageous it would be for little 5. The Shin family's army has been searching outside and others would be suspicious if they saw it. Shin Yu stood behind Chen Roqiu and lowered her head so that others could not see her curled-up lips. Serves her right. The matter of Shin Miao going missing was probably the happiest thing that she heard today. She did not think of anything else and only hoped that Shin Miao would be like Shin Qing and be sent back with her innocence tainted. Then from then on, she would be the only daughter of the Shin family. At that time, so what if Shin Xian and wife had the military power and Shin Qiu, her older brother, would protect her? Shin Miao's reputation would be ruined and she would not be able to lift her head up for the rest of her life. No. Luo Shuiyan's eyebrows were vertical and she glared at Chen Roqiu. If it is reported to the authorities, Jiao Jiao's reputation would be completely ruined. Today Shin Miao went missing and she wanted to hide it from others, but the few households of the Shin family were all shrewd and the paper could not wrap the fire. The matter of Shin Miao going missing was finally revealed. Chapter 286. Shin Xian and Shin Qiu searched for the entire night but to no avail and could only order their subordinates to continue searching while they returned to the residence to make plans. Eldest saw. Chen Roqiu had a sincere face. Is Jiao Jiao's reputation more important or her life? If females lose their lives for the sake of reputation, one think that eldest Saw would regret it in the future. Chen Roqiu, who are you cursing? When Luo Shuiyan heard it, she immediately shouted angrily. She was an impatient person and it was nothing much to say about herself, but she could not tolerate others saying bad things about Shin Miao and immediately fall out with Chen Roqiu. What are you quarreling about? Old Shin Furen, who had been silent all the while, opened her mouth and glared at Luo Shuiyan. You yourself lost fifth lady and why are you getting angry at others? Did number two's family say something wrong? After a long time, fifth lady's life would be gone, so what is the use of reputation? On the surface these words sounded like they were thinking for Shin Miao, but Luo Shuiyan felt uncomfortable and subconsciously wanted to refute. That's right, eldest Shin. Shin Yuan also opened his mouth. Even if one does not report to the authorities, with the Shin family's guards outside searching in such a large array, one fear that someone would guess the truth tomorrow. At that time, what is the difference if one reports to the authorities or not? Shin Yuan had already seen Shin Miao as a thorn in his eyes and could not wait to get rid of her. Now that he had not even made a move and Shin Miao had already suffered a calamity, how could it be justified if one did not add oil to the fire? Shin Gue was even happier, but he was not one who would take the lead and only had a regretful expression on his face. Ai, little five is such a good child. How could she encounter such a thing? Eldest brother, do you have any enemies? The person Shin Gue hated the most was Shin Xian. Shin Xian's meritorious services were outstanding and he was always pressured by the court. If Shin Miao met with an accident because of Shin Xian, one feared that Shin Xian would feel guilty for a lifetime. Shin Gue then stabbed a knife into Shin Xian's heart. Wan Yinyang pulled Shin Dongling and stood behind Shin Gue. She was a Yinyang and had no right to speak here. He listened to the others talk without making a sound, but he was secretly glad that he had held Shin Dongling tight, and did not let Shin Dongling be abducted. Shin Dongling's head was lowered and one could not see her expression clearly. That's enough, eldest sister's family. Others will find out anyway. If we report it to the authorities now, we might be able to make fifth sister suffer less. Report to the authorities earlier. Old Shin Furen said, but a glint flashed in her eyes. What she hated the most was that the son of the old general's first wife would always suppress her son in everything. At least Shin Miao did not live up to expectations and made her feel much better. Who knew when it started, Shin Miao had surpassed Shin Qing and Shin Yu, and in addition to Shin Qiu loitering around the residence every day, it made her heart feel suffocated. This time it was rare to see Shin Miao in misfortune, thus old Shin Furen was almost secretly delighted. She could not wait to report to the authorities so that all the people of Ming Qi would know that Shin Miao was abducted by kidnappers. It would be best if she lost her innocence and the first household of the Shin family would not be able to lift their heads up. This would be delightful. Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan had yet to speak, but Shen Qiu clenched his fists tightly. He was young and full of vigor, but it did not mean that he did not know how to read people's expressions. On the surface these people were saying that they were thinking for Shen Miao's sake, but their eyes were flashing with schadenfreude and hitting others when they were down. No wonder Shen Miao changed so much in 1 year. Her schemes were deep and she was so mature that she was not like a child. It was all because she was forced out by the Shen family. There was never a moment like now where he clearly realized what kind of environment Shen Miao was living in. Luo Shuiyan and Shen Xian looked at each other and their gazes were fierce. If one were to say that there was still some misunderstanding regarding the fire in the ancestral hall, after all they did not see the cause of the matter, but the scene in front of them was clearly presented in front of them. Luo Shuiyan was angry, but Shen Xian was extremely shocked and disappointed. He treated them with sincerity, respect, and helped them, but when his daughter met with an accident, he saw that he was secretly delighted. Shen Xian suddenly felt that those happy and harmonious and friendly scenes were so ironic. Chapter 287. Shen Yu worriedly said, "What would those people do to fifth younger sister?" Fifth younger sister is very good-looking, and one heard that good-looking young ladies would be sold especially far away by kidnappers. If they were not kidnappers, one feared that they would not let fifth younger sister have a good time after so much trouble. As she spoke, 2 drops of tears flowed down as if she was extremely sad. Shen Dongling, who was standing quietly at the side, had a touch of ridicule in her eyes, but she was still in a daze and did not speak. "Eldest brother, are we going to report to the authorities or not?" Shen Wan asked. The atmosphere was in a deadlock when suddenly one heard the panting voice of a servant, "Furen, master, fifth young lady has returned." That servant ran into the main hall and did not even take a breath before saying, "Fifth young lady was sent back by the people from the princess residence." Everyone was first shocked by the servant's words of Shen Miao's return to the residence. Shen Xian and wife were pleasantly surprised, and when they heard the 3 words princess residence, they did not recover to their senses for a moment. It was Shen Wan's heart that moved and stepped forward to ask, "Which princess residence?" That servant caught his breath and said with some excitement, "It is Her Highness Princess Rong Xian." She had sent a lot of people to escort fifth young lady back to the residence, and the guards are standing at the entrance of the residence. Princess Rong Xian? Chen Roqiu's footsteps paused and she bit her lips. Princess Rong Xian did not ask about court matters, and it was nothing to males, but it was different to females, especially to the circle of noble ladies in the capital. Now all the females in the palace had to give face to Princess Rong Xian, but Princess Rong Xian herself was hard to get close to. She was serious and old-fashioned, and many noble Furens who wanted to please her suffered a loss. But this legendary most old-fashioned and serious princess actually personally sent Shen Miao back. Looking at this situation, it was actually not low. Chen Roqiu's heart was so jealous that she was about to go crazy. Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan did not say anything further as they ran out of the residence, and when the rest of the people saw the situation, they also followed. One saw a dense crowd of people at the entrance of the general's residence, and when one walked closer, one could see clearly that they were all armored guards, and the number of people was really frightening. And there was a crowd of commoners surrounding the entrance to watch the bustle. Most likely they did not know what tricks the Shen residence was playing. Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan were surprised for a moment, as it was out of their expectations to see so many guards. They then saw a female official walking to the side of the carriage and help Shen Miao down. Luo Shuiyan quickly went up and said worriedly, "Jiao Jiao." She looked at Shen Miao from top to bottom and only breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that Shen Miao's expression was normal. That female official smiled and said, "Today Her Princess Highness was playing at the Wanli Lake and coincidentally met the lost fifth Shen young lady. The princess carriage accidentally knocked down fifth Shen young lady and thus brought fifth Shen young lady back to the princess residence to rest." One did not think that General Shen and Shen Furen would be anxious, and the princess let this servant apologize. These words frankly explained why Shen Miao would walk together with Princess Rong Xian. even though there were still some peculiarities, but since Princess Rong Xian had spoken, who would dare to question it? Today, with so many guards and attracted so many onlookers, one feared that no one would believe even if someone wanted to spread some unfavorable rumors. This was a genuine confirmation of Shen Miao's innocence. At the back of the crowd, old Shen Furen was so angry that her face turned green. It was not easy to wait for Shen Miao to be unlucky, but Princess Rong Xian appeared midway. Old Shen Furen even hated Princess Rong Xian, who was a busybody. Your Princess Highness is too polite. It should be this Shen thanking your Princess Highness for saving my daughter. Shen Xian replied. That servant quickly moved sideways to avoid it and smiled. One dare not accept General Shen's courtesy. Since the person has been sent, this servant will leave first. Finishing, she urged the guards to move, and when she was about to leave, she suddenly thought of something and walked to Shen Miao's side. The princess is very fond of 5th Shen young lady. Today the reception was rushed, and before leaving, she said that if 5th Shen young lady is free in the future, please visit the princess residence. Her Princess Highness will definitely entertain you well. Finishing, she then left with the guards in the carriage. Chapter 288. Princess Rong Xian was very fond of Shen Miao. And even let Shen Miao visit the princess residence when she is free. The Shen family stood at the residence's doors and were stunned by the last sentence that the female official said. Shen Yu almost crushed the handkerchief in her hands. She naturally knew about Princess Rong Xian and also knew how difficult it was to get close to this princess. Now one did not know what sorcery Shen Miao used that even Princess Rong Xian had a whole new level of respect for her and was able to climb up a relationship with the imperial family. Then in the future would she be able to build a relationship with His Highness Prince Ding? Shen Yu was really anxious this time. Shen Dongling's eyes moved and heard Wan Yinyang's envious voice, 5th young lady is really lucky. This is a princess. Shen Yuan snorted coldly and did not look at the residence's doors again before turning and leaving with a brush of his sleeves. Shen Miao gently smiled at the Shen family. Today I have made everyone worried. She said it in such an understated manner and immediately made Shen Xian and wife recall the faces of the Shen family's people just now, and their faces became somewhat ugly. Seeing that Shen Miao was fine, everyone in the Shen family was disappointed, and when they looked at Shen Miao again, they were so angry that they could not breathe. After old Shen Furen reprimanded Shen Miao with a few words, they all found an excuse to leave. Shen Miao followed Shen Qiu and the rest to the western courtyard, and when she saw Shen Qiu and the rest's ugly expressions, she understood in her heart. Previously she deliberately dragged the princess residence's people to not inform the Shen family of her whereabouts in advance. True feelings were seen in adversity, and similarly, false feelings could be seen in adversity. It was impossible for Shen Xian to change his temperament towards the Shen family overnight, just like how in her previous lifetime, she still had hopes for Fu Xiu-yi until the very last moment. One's feelings towards the Shen family could not be recovered in one night, thus it would take some time for Shen Xian to completely change his view towards the Shen family. Just nice to take this opportunity to let Shen Xian see clearly what kind of a group of jackals and wolves the Shen family were. When they were still in the residence, facing Shen Miao who was in distress, the Shen family were able to hit her when she was down, and when Shen Xian was not in the Ding capital, Shen Xian was not a fool and naturally could guess what had happened to Shen Miao. Sure enough, when they reached the western courtyard, Shen Xian and Luo Shuaiyan carefully inquired about tonight's matters, and after confirming that she was all right, they then instructed Shen Miao to rest early, and both of them left. Before they left, they called Shen Qiu along, obviously wanting to discuss something. After the three of them left, Shen Miao took the opportunity when there was no one around to roll up her trousers. On her calf, the wound was bandaged with a white silk cloth, and it seemed to still have the warmth of someone's palm. It was a night full of surprises, but it seemed that he understood Xia Jing Xing more, but the more he understood his opponent, the more dangerous he felt. In the future, it would be best if we don't come into contact with each other. In the eastern courtyard of the Shen residence, Shen Yuan was sitting in the room with a gloomy expression. After Ren Wanyun went crazy, he rarely went to visit and there was a faintly discernible estrangement between him and Shin Gui. He was not a person who valued friendship and would even kill his own younger sister, so naturally everything was based on benefits. One thought that Shin Miao would not be able to escape this calamity tonight, but who knew that not only did she return unscathed, she even got involved in the princess residence. This made Shin Yuan feel a trace of danger. The strength of the opponent was not enough to be feared, but what made one fearful was that this opponent was still getting stronger. From an idiot young lady who was bullied by others to someone that no one dared to belittle. Her thoughts were deep and her methods were ruthless. Princess Rong Xian, that old-fashioned person, was also subdued by Shin Miao at the end. This made one could not help but think that if Shin Miao had the heart in the future, would she be able to find even more powerful people to back her up? After roping in more people, would the next person to deal with would be him? It was shameful for a proud and arrogant person like Shin Yuan to treat a young female as an opponent. However, he had to admit that it was this young female who had just reached marriageable age that made his second household become like this. Shin Yuan would never leave any future troubles for himself. Shin Miao had harmed the second household to this extent and it was obvious that she would not be kind and one day the spearhead would be aimed at him. It was just that Shin Miao was not difficult to deal with, but the difficult thing was that there was still Shin Xian and Luo Shuiyan behind her. After all, some considerations were needed, but... Shin Yuan looked at the letter in his hands and suddenly smiled. Even though the first household of the Shin family had strong military power, but if there was no successor, then it would only be a pile of mud. One did not know if Shin Xian and wife would be like Ren Wanyun and go crazy from the pain after losing Shin Miao and Shin Qiu, this pair of siblings. Chapter 289. In the 69th year of Ming Qi's Winter New Year, there was a night of heavy snow. Auspicious snow indicated a good harvest and the common people were in a joyous mood as they prayed for a good harvest in the coming year. However, to the general residents in the Ding capital, this was definitely a special year. The Shin family's second household lost a daughter and the matriarch of the household went crazy. And the first household that had the most power and influence seemed to be in discord with the other two households. It was not as close as in the past and there was an obvious estrangement. The Huang family that was previously engaged to Shin Qing, because of Shin Qing's matter, it was considered as a complete enmity with the Shin family. Because Shin Xian and wife were not in the Ding capital all year round, they did not vent their anger on him. As for the Wei family that was engaged to Shin Miao, Luo Shuiyan personally came forward and personally confirmed that it was just a misunderstanding. The Wei family was honest and did not make things difficult for her. In addition, Shin Xian also promised to help Wei Darren in court in the future, thus the Wei family was naturally willing to give this face. Thus to Shin Miao, this new year was rather good. Without Fu Xiu-yi, without Prince Yu, and without Ren Wanyun and Shin Qing, some things were still changing step by step. However, she was happy but some people were not so happy. In Rongjing Tang, old Shin Furen was sitting on her seat as Shin Yuan Bo crawled around beside her, but she was somewhat impatient. A look of resentment appeared on her shriveled face. Eldest Shin, now do not place me in her eyes. This year there was not even a little more money in the public residence. The few chests of treasures that were previously bestowed by the palace were all locked in their own courtyard. What do they want to do? And they still do not place me in their eyes. Old Shin Furen got angry when the matter was mentioned. In the past, Shin Xian would send the things bestowed by the palace to the public residence every year. Because both husband and wife were not in the Ding capital, other than leaving some toys that Shin Miao liked, the rest of the things were useless to them. Old Shin Furen had tasted the sweetness of it, and now that there was an unforeseen event between Shin Xian and the Shin family, Shin Xian did not even send any money. In old Shin Furen's eyes, it was simply disgraceful. Old Furen must not be angry. Perhaps after these few days, when eldest master's anger has dissipated, the things will be sent over. Zhang Mama, who was at the side, comforted, "One think that eldest master is dissatisfied with the treatment of fifth young lady, thus he is not willing to send the things over." "How did you treat fifth girl?" Old Shen Furen said angrily, "For so many years, I provided for her to eat and drink and raised her up to this age. Eldest Shen is still not satisfied. I think he just doesn't want to recognize me as his mother. An ingrate who can't support his family. And that Luo Shuiyan, now even the fifth girl has become so cunning. Who knows if there's someone teaching her behind the scenes." Zhang Mama saw that old Shen Furen was angry and was silent for a moment before saying, "Now fifth young lady has grown up and her thoughts are heavier." However, fifth miss had grown up in front of old grandma. Fifth miss had always been obedient to old grandma's words. It could be seen that she still respected old grandma. It would be better for old Furen to summon fifth young miss in front of her one day and coax her. Both of them were young girls, so it would be easy to coax them. Fifth miss is the lifeblood of first master and first madam. If we can control fifth miss, doesn't it mean that we can control first master and his family? This Zhang Mama was also a scheming person. In fact, old Shen Furen was after all a prostitute and had endless despicable means, but when it came to being the matriarch of the household, she had the heart but not the ability. For so many years, if it was not for Zhang Mama's guidance, one did not know how big of a joke would have been. Old Shen Furen sneered, "I still need to coax her. Once I see that girl, I would think of that slut. She had been dead for so many years but still occupied master's heart. Favoring their first household in everything, and now I still need to please her. I feel disgusted when I see her." Chapter 290. Zhang Mama was somewhat helpless and wanted to continue persuading but saw the maid at the door saying, "Second young master, you have arrived." Shen Yuan walked in big strides. "Yuan." Seeing Shen Yuan enter, old Shen Furen's attitude eased up a lot. Shen Yuan Bo, who was on the couch, saw it and also smiled as he looked at his second older brother. Shen Yuan did not reach out to hug Shen Yuan Bo and only smiled, "Come over to take a look at Zumu." "What is there to see about me?" Old Shen Furen said angrily, but her face was filled with joy. Among these grandsons, the one she loved the most was Shen Yuan. Shen Yuan was talented and learned at such a young age and even entered an official career. Everyone praised him and gave her face. Naturally, he was the most valued by old Shen Furen. One was fortunate to obtain a bottle of snow jade ointment and specially brought it over for Zumu. Zumu must not disappoint this grandson's good intentions. Shen Yuan smiled as he handed the bottle over to old Shen Furen. Old Shen Furen was somewhat surprised and then pretended to be angry. "How old am I already and still need these? Could it be that you are deliberately angering me?" Even though it was so, there was an expression of fondness on her face. Old Shen Furen was after all a songstress and these rouge and cosmetics would not be broken even when she was old. Shen Yuan also knew how to cater to her liking and immediately old Shen Furen's gloomy mood was swept away. Zumu is still young and this kind of good thing is to be used on Zumu. Shen Yuan flattered without a change in expression. Both grandfather and grandson then spoke a few more words. Shen Yuan was an astute person and old Shen Furen liked him, and in addition he deliberately picked words that made old Shen Furen happy. The atmosphere in Rongjing Tang was incomparably harmonious and even Shen Yuan Bo, who was on the couch, was left out. After speaking for a while, Shen Yuan suddenly thought of something and said unintentionally, "Speaking of Zumu, it seems that in a few days Biao younger sister and Biao younger brother will be coming." Old Shen Furen was surprised for a moment before speaking in a cold tone, "What Biao younger brother and Biao younger sister?" "They will leave after staying for a few days." Before old Shen Furen became a singing female, she also had a family, and perhaps it was her family that sold her to a brothel. Old Shen Furen's ancestral home was Suzhou, and afterwards old Shen Furen was brought to the Ding capital by General Shen to become a general's Furen, thus naturally she cut off all contact with her family. It was just that this year one did not know where that family heard about old Shen Furen's news and let their own pair of grandchildren to come to the Ding capital, saying that they were here to visit old Shen Furen, but in fact everyone knew that it was just to borrow the autumn wind. For a person like old Shen Furen who would forsake righteousness at the sight of profit, and having not met for so many years, it was naturally impossible for her to have any kinship. Now that Shen Yuan mentioned the matter, naturally she was not willing to talk more. Shen Yuan said with a smile, I have never seen this pair of Biao younger sister before, one think that their age is similar to fifth younger sister. He sighed, speaking of which, during eldest brother's return to the Ding capital, I heard that eldest Bo and eldest Shen were helping him to pick out a favored young lady. Most likely they would be worried about him. Shen Qiu wants to pick a wife. Old Shen Furen suddenly sat up straight, why do I not know of this matter? Yuan, do you know which family's young lady they are picking? This one do not know. Shen Yuan thought about it, but with eldest Bo's and eldest Shen's family background, naturally they should pick that young lady from the residence that has a high position and power. Eldest brother already has such a future, and with the support of eldest Sa's residence, it would be like adding wings to a tiger and he would be able to go up another level. The more Shen Yuan said it like that, the uglier old Shen Furen's face became. After a long while she then said sourly, that would also depend on whether the other young lady would fancy him or not. Shen Yuan pretended not to know and said unintentionally, but the most important thing is that eldest brother likes it. If eldest brother likes it, then there is no harm in not having a family background. If I were to say, perhaps our youngest Biao younger sister would be fancied by eldest brother, and at that time it would be even closer. Chapter 291. What nonsense are you talking about? Old Shen Furen's brows wrinkled and subconsciously refuted Shen Yuan's words. What kind of identity does she have? How would eldest Shen take a fancy to her? I am just speaking casually. Grandmother need not take it to heart. Shen Yuan smiled and changed the topic. After saying a few more words, he then took his leave. Before leaving, he looked at Zhang Mama without batting an eyelid. After Shen Yuan left, old Shen Furen kept thinking about what Shen Yuan said. On one hand, she knew that Shen Yuan's words were outrageous. No matter how open-minded Shen Xian and wife were, they would not take a fancy to that family's lowly status. Moreover, Shen Qiu was not a lecherous person, so this matter was as difficult as ascending to heaven. But on the other hand, old Shen Furen was moved by Shen Yuan's words. If Shen Qiu found a noble family's young lady, would not his power go up a level? Old Shen Furen could not see Shen Qiu doing well, so how could she watch him grow more powerful? If he married her own grandniece, not only would it not be better, it would drag the first household of the Shen family down and drag Shen Qiu down. That was called good. Zhang Mama was massaging old Shen Furen's shoulders as she softly said, Old Furen, actually this old servant also feel that second young master's words are somewhat reasonable. After a pause, she then said, think about it, if eldest young master and Biao young lady were married, they would be even closer. Biao young lady would be on old Furen's side, so it would be much easier to do anything. She said softly, if the marriage is successful, in the future money matters would be easy. Biao young lady's money would not be your money. When the words were said, old Shen Furen's eyes lit up. Correct, if Shen Qiu and the family's grandniece were married, then the grandniece would naturally be on her side. By controlling Shen Qiu, it was the same as controlling the first household. Zhang Mama continued, if Biao young master and fifth young lady were married, it would be even better. In the future the entire first household's money and property would all belong to old Furen. Old Shen Furen's heart moved. Zhang Mama's words were all aimed at her, making her heart burst with joy. Thinking of being able to seize the first household's assets and secretly use all kinds of methods to make the first household in chaos, old Shen Furen was extremely happy. But in the blink of an eye, he became worried and said, it's easy to say, but my grandnieces and nephews all came from small families. It's not like old master hasn't seen the world. How could you take a fancy to them? My old madam. Mother Zhang smiled. You've forgotten about the methods you used in the past. It's just a small matter between a man and a woman. How can it be so complicated? Nothing is impossible if you use your brain a little. Her words caused old Shinfuren to have a little reverie, and after a moment, old Shinfuren also laughed. Most likely she wanted to laugh in a charming manner, but because of her old age, it was somewhat strange. That kind of old amorous expression made her look exceptionally ugly. She said, "That is also true. A man and a woman's love is just a small matter." After saying those words, she and Zhang Mama looked at each other and saw the deep meaning in each other's eyes. Old Shinfuren said, "Someone come and find the box in my room. My pair of grandnieces have not seen for a long time, so it is time to give them some greeting gifts." Outside the room, Shen Yuan looked at Rong Jing Tang's low laughter, and a trace of sneer flashed in his eyes before he slowly walked out of the courtyard. In the western courtyard, Shen Miao handed 10 banknotes to Mo Qing. "Go to Bao Xiang Lu and look for a young lady called Luing. I have already inquired about it. 100 taels of silver can buy her for a night. Take the money and sit with her for a night. Do not do anything and go every 3 days." Shen Miao said. When Mo Qing heard the 3 words Bao Xiang Lu, his face turned green, and when he heard that Shen Miao wanted him to look for young lady Luing, his face turned from green to red. He delayed taking the banknotes and looked at Shen Miao. Young lady, you are joking with this subordinate." Chapter 292. When did you see me joking around with others? Shen Miao's face was serious, and Mo Qing thought about it. Ever since he knew Shen Miao till now, Shen Miao had always been serious and did not do anything to joke around with others. But it was too outrageous to want him to go to the brothel. Mo Qing shook his head and stammered with a red face, "Young lady, this subordinate. Why must this subordinate go to Bao Xiang Lu?" Shen Miao looked at him. Speaking of which, after following her for so long in her previous lifetime, she indeed did not see Mo Qing involved with any young lady. After being a servant for so many years, one thought that it was because of the strict rules in the palace, but who knew that Mo Qing had such a temperament, hemming and hawing? How was he like a commander of the guards? She said, "Let you go, then go. If that young lady Luing asks why you are like this, then do not say anything. In short, listen clearly and be a mute." Mo Qing, seeing Mo Qing's unwilling expression, Shen Miao said in a sharp voice, "You do not even listen to my words. This subordinate does not dare." Mo Qing quickly said. When the words came out, he felt somewhat depressed. He was a dignified 8 feet tall man, and there were few opponents under Shen Qiu's command, so why did he feel flustered after being shouted at by Shen Miao? Logically speaking, even though he was protecting Shen Miao's safety, he was still Shen Qiu's subordinate, and he did not treat Shen Qiu with such caution. Could it be that after following Shen Miao, his servility had become so strong? He was puzzled after much thought, but heard Shen Miao continuing, "I heard that this young lady Luing is naturally charming and has many means, and there were countless of people that fell under her skirt. Even though she is not the signature of Bao Xiang Lu, she is still considered a popular young lady. I picked you because I know that you are a gentleman and have a firm will. Let you sit for a night, then sit for a night, and do not take advantage of the opportunity to do anything. If you mess it up, you do not need to stay in the Shen family's army anymore." Mo Qing's face alternated between green and red, as he had never felt so embarrassed before. It was fine if Shen Miao said it so blatantly, but she even used a scrutinizing gaze to sweep over his entire body and even stopped at a certain place on his waist. If Shen Miao was not the mistress, one feared that Mo Qing would have brushed his sleeves and left in a huff. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He did not know how Shen Miao grew up to have such a temperament. To look at him in such a manner, Mo Qing felt that he was like a pork on the chopping board. Seeing that Mo Qing's face had turned purple, Shen Miao then let him off and waved her hands, "Go. Remember what I said." Mo Qing ran out in a flash. Jingzhe had just returned from outside, and when she saw the situation, she said, "What happened to Gardemo?" You look like you are in pain. Did something happen? Mo Qing had always done things calmly, and this was the first time one saw him in such a sorry state. Nothing, just feeling shy. Shen Miao said, how is the matter of inquiring? Jing Zhe was somewhat curious as to what Shen Miao was talking about when she heard it, inquired clearly. Old Furen's maiden families Biao Young Lady and Biao Young Master will arrive in 2 days. Really? Shen Miao smiled faintly. That Biao Young Lady's maiden name is Jing Chu Chu. How did Young Lady know? Jing Zhe was surprised. Shen Miao did not speak and lowered her head to hide the killing intent in her eyes. Naturally she knew that it was her previous lifetimes. Eldest saw. 2 days later, the skies cleared up. Shen Miao got up early and went out to the courtyard to watch Shen Qiu and Shen Xian compete in swordplay. On such a cold day, both of them were sweating profusely and the surrounding guards were secretly applauding. Just when they were in high spirits, they saw old Shen Furen's maid, Xie, running over and saying that old Shen Furen wanted everyone to rush to Rongjing Tang as the maiden families Biao Young Lady and Biao Young Master had arrived. Chapter 293. Shen Qiu scratched his head and asked curiously, which Biao Young Lady or Biao Young Master? How come I do not know? Luo Shuayan quickly understood, it is the relative of old Taitai's paternal family. Previously one had not heard of it and did not know why they suddenly came over. Shen Xian did not have any reaction. Old Shen Furen was his stepmother, but old Shen Furen's background doomed her to not be seen in public. For so many years, there was no news at all from that paternal family and only knew that they were from Suzhou. But they came to the Ding capital from thousands of miles away and were of the younger generation. Since old Shen Furen was so fond of them, they could only go and put on an act. Shen Qiu put down his sword and went back with Shen Xian to change clothes. When he turned back, he saw Shen Miao standing at the door with a somewhat cold expression. He could not help but walk over and ask, why is younger sister suddenly unhappy? Just now it was still all right. Shen Miao recovered to her senses and looked at Shen Qiu before smiling, nothing. When the few of them reached Rongjing Tang, they heard old Shen Furen's laughter from afar. Ever since Shen Qing's accident, old Shen Furen had a sullen face every day and there was no time for her to be this happy. Shen Xian and Luo Shuayan were somewhat surprised. When the few of them stepped into Rongjing Tang, they saw that Chen Roqiu's and Shen Gui's household were actually there. In front of old Shen Furen stood a male and female. When old Shen Furen saw Shen Xian and the rest coming, she said to the two people in front, this is your eldest beau's family. She then said to Shen Xian, this is my brother's grandson and granddaughter, Guansheng and Chu Chu. Jing Guansheng, Jing Chu Chu. When the two of them heard it, they quickly turned around and greeted Shen Xian and entourage. Shen Miao stood motionless and calmly sized up the two people in front of her. Jing Guansheng was 18 this year and Jing Chu Chu was 16 this year, both at the prime of their youth. Jing Guan was ordinary and slightly plump. However, his skin was white and he had a scholarly air. He wore a brown long robe. The material was considered good and the cut was also generous and fitting. However, his eyes revealed a faintly discernible shrewdness which completely destroyed the scholarly air. This Jing Chu Chu was actually not bad. Perhaps old Shen Furen's maiden family had always looked good as Jing Chu Chu's appearance was similar to old Shen Furen's, a pretty daughter of a humble family. But compared to old Shen Furen when she was young, she was much more restrained. The primrose-colored fragrant silk skirt and the autumn-colored lotus gown were also extremely exquisite. She had the countenance of a flower and the face of the moon but seemed to be extremely shy and bashful as she shyly spoke and saluted, but her eyes were staring straight at the ground, not daring to look up at anyone. When she greeted Shen Miao smiled, why is Biao older sister only looking at the ground? There's no sign of me underground. Jing Chu Chu was startled for a moment and raised her head. She looked at her at a loss and then looked at old Shen Furen. Old Shinfuren suddenly frowned. Chu Chu has just arrived and is somewhat afraid of strangers. Fifth girl, you should be more courteous. Old Shinfuren's unscrupulous shielding immediately made Shin Xin and the rest's expressions change. They would not let Shin Miao feel wronged for an unknown relative who was not related by blood, thus their attitude towards Jing Chu Chu immediately became somewhat cold. Old Shinfuren did not feel it at all, but it was Shin Yuan who frowned and looked at Shin Miao without batting an eyelid. Shin Miao smiled, afraid of strangers. No matter, one would not be afraid after staying for a few more days. In this place, one would eventually become familiar with one's surroundings. Her words were kind and there seemed to be some rare warmth, but in the ears of those who were attentive, they felt that it was not the case. Jing Chu Chu smiled shyly at Shin Miao before lowering her head to play with the handkerchief in her hands. It was as if one would blush with one more look. It was Jing Guansheng who was at the side who smiled gently and elegantly at Shin Miao. Chapter 294. Shin Miao's gaze did not even land on Jing Guansheng. She stared at Jing Chu Chu but could hear the sound of her teeth grinding. Jing Chu Chu was always like this, shy and bashful. She had no schemes and would always lower her head timidly, as if anyone could bully her. So when the incident happened, when they saw her and Shin Qiu lying on the same bed after drinking, everyone would insult Shin Qiu for being worse than a beast. Who would have thought that this young lady who was as pure as a piece of white paper would at the end put on a green hat for Shin Qiu, and because she accidentally killed her adulterer, Shin Qiu was sent to prison. Those military matters that often went wrong after marrying in and Shin Qiu's broken leg from the horse, most likely all had something to do with Jing Chu Chu. And at the very end, Shin Qiu's body was found in the pond and Jing Chu Chu ran away with the money of the first household of the Shin family. A woman's heart was the most poisonous. Shin Miao felt that this face that was as gentle as a rabbit was more poisonous than a snake. After all, even though Shin Qiu did not like it, he still treated Jing Chu Chu sincerely after marrying her, and with Shin Qiu's sincere temperament, he would definitely not let Jing Chu Chu suffer. But Jing Chu Chu was an out-and-out white-eyed wolf. Shin Miao kept staring at Jing Chu Chu, and even with Shin Qiu's careless heart, he also sensed that something was wrong and asked in puzzlement, "Younger sister?" Jing Guansheng also said, "Why is fifth younger sister staring at Chu Chu?" Jing Chu Chu took a step back and somewhat nervously turned her body sideways to let Jing Guansheng block Shin Miao's gaze, as if she was very afraid. Shin Miao smiled gently. "Biao older sister is really too beautiful. One was not careful and looked too much." Shin Yu bit her lips. Now that Shin Miao's appearance was getting older, she had already taken away a lot of her limelight, and now there was an additional Jing Chu Chu, making her heart extremely uncomfortable. Jing Chu Chu's face turned red and whispered to Shin Miao, "Younger sister is the one who is beautiful." Shin Miao smiled and declined to comment. Old Shinfuren coughed twice and said, "Since Chu Chu and Guansheng have arrived, they are guests of our residence and are all one family. Fifth girl, eldest brother, bring them around more on normal days." There was obviously Shin Yuan and Shin Yu, and at the very least there was Shin Dongling. It was not like the Shin residence only had Shin Miao and Shin Qiu, these two grandsons, but he came over to warn them. Shin Miao's lips slightly hooked up and looked at Jing Chu Chu, who had her head lowered and smiled warmly. "Naturally, I will take good care of older sister." She usually had a delicate appearance, but in this room of females, there was a kind of unruffled bearing, and that unhurried smile that bloomed just now had an indescribable charm. Jing Chu Chu was still all right, but Jing Guansheng was somewhat infatuated looking at her. Seeing Shin Miao like this, old Shinfuren was extremely satisfied. She said with a smile, "Since that is the case, all of you can withdraw. I still have some words that I want to discuss with Chu Chu, that girl. After so many years of not seeing one another, one do not know if the family is well." Old Shinfuren's loving look fell into Chen Roqiu's eyes and she was somewhat moved. However, she only respectfully agreed and followed the crowd to leave, except for Rong Jing Tang. Outside of Rong Jing Tang, Jing Guanxing said to Shen Miao, "What does fifth younger sister like to do at home?" Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan were walking at the front and did not hear the words, but it was Shen Qiu who walked to Shen Miao's side vigilantly when he heard it and did not speak as he looked at Jing Guanxing. Shen Miao gently smiled, "Nothing much, just reading books. Coincidentally, I also like to read books in the residence." Jing Guanxing smiled, "Most likely one can seek advice from Biao younger sister." Shen Miao swept a glance at him and even Shen Qiu noticed the contempt in her eyes and was somewhat surprised that Shen Miao would be so unfriendly to a person whom she had just met for the first time. He only heard Shen Miao saying, "Forget it. One think that Biao older brother's residence does not have many books, to seek advice from me. It is better to get someone to send a few books to Biao older brother as they are all unique copies." She actually did not conceal her disdain of the other's poor background. Jing Guanxing's face stiffened in a moment. In Rongjing Tang, old Shen Furen was holding Jing Chu Chu's hands and said benevolently, "To be so beautiful at such a young age, one do not know if there is any betrothal at this age." Jing Chu Chu softly said, replying to old Furen, "Not yet. Not yet." Old Shen Furen's smile deepened, "With your appearance and temperament, it would be good if you can be my Shen family's granddaughter-in-law." Jing Chu Chu lowered her head and her face turned even redder as her hands gradually clenched. Their Jing family was only an ordinary merchant and heard that their grandfather had a sister who had prospered in the Ding capital, thus they sent the two of them to the Ding capital, hoping that the other party would be able to help them. Early on when they reached the Shen residence, Jing Chu Chu was already dazzled by the riches and honor of the Shen residence. If she was able to marry into the general residence, then she would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of her life and she would be a Furen of a wealthy family. How could Jing Chu Chu's heart not be excited? It was just that she could not show it on her face. Old Shen Furen patted her hands and smiled, "At this age, you are very compatible with eldest family's Chiu-er. Our Chiu-er is now a deputy general and what is even better is that he is still unmarried." Chapter 295. Ever since that day when Jing Chu Chu and Jing Guanxing came to the Shen residence, there was a subtle atmosphere in the Shen residence. Everyone knew that old Shen Furen was a selfish and stingy person and was not a warm and generous person. Facing her maternal family's grandnephews and nephews who had not met for many years, not only did she not show any cold face, she treated them very cordially and often gave them money as gifts. But these two people seemed to be planning to stay in the residence for a long time and did not have any intention to leave. Because old Shen Furen treated them politely, the servants would also look at her expression and similarly treated them politely. In the eastern courtyard of the Shen residence, in a certain side room of Kai Yun Yuan, Wan Yinyang was sitting in front of the table and the colorful knots were quickly formed in her hands as she spoke to Shen Dongling who was sitting behind the screen practicing calligraphy. Has old Furen's temperament changed? She treats Biao young lady and Biao young master so well that it is almost better than Ling. Old Furen's calculations are not wrong at all. Shen Dongling sat behind the screen and her complexion was much better than before, at least she was not as pale as before. Now that Shen Gui often came over to Wan Yinyang's place to sit, he also paid more attention to her and let people send a lot of medicinal herbs. Shen Gui's attitude immediately made the servants in Kai Yun Yuan see some clues, but there were some who were still observing. Even though Ren Wan Yun was crazy, Shen Yuan was still a young master and even if Wan Yinyang was favored again, Shen Dongling was still a daughter. Linger also feel that it is somewhat strange. Wan Yinyang stopped what she was doing, but what is the purpose of old Tai Tai fawning on these two? Shen Dongling smiled, young lady and young master, old Furen naturally hoped that there would be someone who would seduce them. Wan Yinyang quivered and suddenly understood and looked at Shen Dongling, who does old Furen want to make good with them? Powerless and powerless people from a small family and also old Furen's paternal family. Shen Dongling carefully put down a brush, whoever old Furen hates the most, naturally it would be that person. Just as Shen Dongling said, in the western courtyard of the Shen residence, Shen Qiu and Shen Xian had just finished one round of practice and let their subordinates continue to practice as they prepared to rest for a while when they saw a yellow-clad young female walking over from the end of the courtyard. This young lady was as beautiful as a flower and as beautiful as the moon, delicate and timid. She carried a bamboo basket on her wrist, looking very pitiful. She walked to the side, lowered her head and timidly called out, "Cousin, uncle." It was Jing Chu. Luo Shuiyan was guiding the soldiers' movements, and when Shen Xian and Shen Qiu saw this, they were somewhat surprised. Shen Qiu took a step forward and said, "What is younger Biao's sister doing here?" When he said the two words Biao younger sister, he was somewhat not used to it. After all, he had not seen Jing Chu for more than 10 years, and to suddenly have a Biao younger sister, it was somewhat hard for one to accept. Jing Chu smiled shyly and placed the bamboo basket on a stone platform at the side before whispering, Chu had made some snacks for herself. Thinking that Biao older brothers would be tired from practicing the sword, one made some things. One hoped that Biao older brothers and Biao Shu would not dislike it. As he spoke, he lowered his head and opened the lid. Sure enough, a few plates of pastries were brought out. Those pastries were delicately made and smelled sweet. Before Shen Xian could say anything, Shen Qiu, this foodie, had already swallowed his saliva. Shen Xian was also somewhat gratified. Jing Chu was born timid and weak and looked to treat others sincerely, but was somewhat timid. But no matter what, a young lady who was skilled in making pastries would be welcomed everywhere, especially when this young lady was good-looking. Luo Shuiyan was a female general, so how would she know how to make soup? Shen Xian and his son had a good impression of a young lady who could cook. Chapter 296. Jing Chu said, "After disturbing for so many days, one's heart is terrified." Chu does not have much ability, so she made some snacks to express her feelings. Look, she even knew how to repay kindness. Shen Xian and his son liked people who were polite and sensible. Generals were affectionate, and Jing Chu's performance was indeed not bad. Shen Qiu said, "Biao younger sister need not worry. Just treat this as your home and as one family, there is no need to disturb." Jing Chu shyly lowered her head, and Shen Qiu picked up a piece of cake and smiled, "Then I will not be polite." Just as he was about to bite it, he suddenly heard a voice from behind, "Eldest brother." Shen Qiu turned his head over and saw that Shen Miao had come over since some time ago. She was standing at the side of the courtyard with 4 maids behind her, looking at him with cold eyes. One did not know why, but Shen Qiu had a feeling of guilt and subconsciously put down the cake in his hands before asking, "Why is younger sister here?" Shen Miao did not speak and lifted her feet to walk towards them. When she got closer, she saw Gu Yu, Jing Zhe, Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang holding a basket in their hands. Shen Xian asked, Jiao, what is in your basket?" Today's weather is somewhat cold, and thinking that everyone are tired and thirsty from practicing the sword, one made some soup. Shen Miao lightly swept a glance at Shen Qiu, and Shen Qiu felt a chill on his back. He heard Shen Miao saying, "Let those soldiers come over to drink the soup. After stewing mushroom chicken soup for the whole morning, it is good to warm up the body." "I will go call." Qi, who was standing beside Shen Qiu, was overjoyed when he saw that and ran over to the training grounds. After a while, the dozens of soldiers in the courtyard followed over. Shen Miao let Jing Zhe and the rest scoop the soup for everyone. Those soldiers were Shen Xian and Shen Qiu's most capable subordinates, thus they were placed directly in the general residence. When the soldiers saw that there was soup to drink, they were very happy and smiled. "It is still young lady who is considerate of us. Young lady is really kind-hearted." Rough people were actually the best to bribe and win over. Shen Miao knew this very well. Qi drank a mouthful of soup and exclaimed, "This soup is really not bad." He finished it in 2 or 3 gulps and passed it to Jing Zhe, another bowl. Jing Zhe rolled her eyes at Qi. "Of course it is good to drink. This is personally cooked by our young lady. When Shin Xian and Shin Qiu saw it, they were surprised for a moment before Shin Qiu said, "Younger sister personally cooked it?" "Yes." Shin Miao said lightly. "Old GEs, do not drink anymore." Shin Xian roared, "You are not allowed to drink." He shouted at Gu Yu, "Give me a big bowl." Luo Shuiyan had just drunk Bai Lu's soup and was also very surprised. "Jiao Jiao, you actually made this soup yourself? How did your cooking skills improve so much?" The fragrance of the soup floated out and naturally made one salivate. Shin Miao smiled as she looked down, casually made it. In the first few years of her past life, in order to gain Fu Xiuyi's favor, she used all sorts of methods to hone her cooking skills. Afterwards, when she went to the Qin country, she learned a lot of rare dishes under the difficulties of those people. Speaking of which, she had at least seen the dishes of the imperial family of the two countries, thus her horizons and means were much more profound than ordinary people. As for that young lady from a humble family that came to the Ding capital for the first time. Shin Miao's eyes swept over to Jing Chu Chu. Jing Chu Chu was standing behind the pillar, and this time she did not lower her head, but bit her lips and held back her tears as she looked at the group of boorish people who were drinking happily, as if she had suffered a lot of grievances. The D young lady personally cooked the soup, and it was much more precious than the snacks that Biao young lady made. Moreover, Shin Miao gave a portion to all the soldiers in the courtyard. With such a comparison, Jing Chu Chu, who only made snacks for Shin Xian father and son, was really too stingy and could not be seen in public. Jing Chu Chu was ashamed and angry as she looked at Shin Miao with a trace of hatred. Chapter 297. Shin Qiu also wanted to scoop some soup, but Gu Yu and the rest did not give it to him. Shin Qiu also sensed something and guessed that Shin Miao was angry with him, but he did not know what he did wrong and could only look at Shin Miao. Shin Miao waited until everyone had almost finished drinking before she let Bai Lu take out a bowl from the bottom of the basket and said, "You like sweet, so this bowl has honey in it. Drink it. Younger sister is really good." Shin Qiu was overjoyed and snatched it over to drink big mouthfuls of soup. Shin Miao could not bear to look at his gluttonous appearance. When those soldiers received the soup that Shin Miao personally made, their hearts were half touched and half liked it. Naturally they flattered Shin Miao and felt that Shin Miao did not have the temperament of a eldest young lady and was approachable and beautiful, just like a fairy. Shin Miao was surrounded by the soldiers and Jing Chu Chu was completely left out. There were several times when she wanted to leave, but at the end she clenched her teeth and stayed. When everyone went to practice their swords, Shin Xian and Luo Shuiyan also went over. Shin Qiu sat on the stone lion to rest, and Shin Miao then walked over to Jing Chu Chu's side and said with a smile, "Biao older sister's desserts are not bad, but martial artists would be tired and thirsty after practicing swords during the day. You still make desserts, wouldn't it make their mouths even more parched?" Shin Miao said with a smile, "Next time it is better to make soup." Jing Chu Chu's face turned green and white. Shin Miao's words were clearly exposing that she was using the pretense of sending desserts, but her thoughts were not really thinking for these martial artists, otherwise she would not have sent these dry things. Even though she was angry in her heart, Jing Chu Chu still lowered her head in panic, as if she was very afraid. Many thanks to Biao younger sister's reminder. Chu Chu will not need to worry. Finishing, she looked at Shin Qiu, who was at the side, for help, hoping that Shin Qiu would help her out. Unfortunately, even though Shin Qiu's personality was sincere, he was a blockhead who did not understand amorous feelings in matters between men and women, thus he felt inexplicable when he met Jing Chu Chu's gaze. It was Shin Miao who smiled when she saw it. Eldest brother did not want to eat Biao older sister's pastries just now. Eat some now. Cool. Shin Qiu waved his hand. I just drank a bowl of soup. I'm a little full and can't eat much. Let's eat later. Shin Miao was very satisfied. The bowl of soup that was given to Shin Qiu was especially sufficient. She did not believe that after Shin Qiu drank this bowl of soup, he would still have the stomach to eat Jing Chu Chu's pastries. Unless Shinqiu was transformed from a pig. Jing Chu was somewhat disappointed. Shinqiu stood up and said, I will also go and practice. He then walked towards the courtyard. Looking at Shinqiu's receding figure, Jing Chu was somewhat unreconciled and wanted to say something but could only bite her lips as she watched. Shen Miao gently smiled and patted her hands. One fear that Biao older sister's pastries will not taste good when they are cold. If Biao older sister does not mind, one can send it to second older brother. Second older brother? Jing Chu looked at Shen Miao in puzzlement. Yes. Shen Miao smiled gently, like my eldest brother and the rest, they are always in the bitter cold northwestern region all year round and would not be able to appreciate these exquisite things. But my second older brother is different. He had already entered the official career at a young age and is now in the capital, his future is limitless. Shen Miao shook her head and sighed, it is a pity that there is no one around to take care of his daily life. Males are always not concerned about food and clothing. Perhaps Biao older sister's suzhou snacks would suit his appetite. When Jing Chu heard that, her eyes were somewhat cloudy and uncertain. She only heard Shen Miao smiling, perhaps in the future if second older brother has a wife, one would be able to enjoy the good fortune of eating. One do not know which young lady would have the fortune to be my second saw. Biao older sister does not know that my second older brother is the sweetheart of many officials' young ladies in the Ding capital. Second young master. Jing Chu hesitated for a moment before asking, currently there is no young lady that you fancy? Chapter 298. Shen Miao sighed, second older brother is busy with court matters all day, how would he have the time to see other young ladies? Jing Chu was deep in thought and Shen Miao did not expose her and spoke for a while. Seeing that Shinqiu and the rest did not have any intention to stop, Jing Chu felt that it would be strange if she continued to stay, so she left. After Jing Chu left, Shinqiu then came over and carefully looked at Shen Miao for a while before saying, younger sister, why are you strange today? How am I strange? Shen Miao said unhappily, is eldest brother angry that I interrupted you from eating Biao older sister's pastries? I do not mean that. Shinqiu was so anxious that his face turned red, but he heard Shen Miao waving her hands without a care, forget it. But now you are at a good age and a lot of young ladies are looking at you. In the future one must open one's eyes wide when picking a sister-in-law. Shinqiu understood these words and said helplessly, younger sister, what are you talking about? Biao younger sister also did not mean that. She only came to send pastries. If you really like her, then eat as much as you want. Finishing saying these words, Shen Miao left without looking back. This time back, Shinqiu had never seen Shen Miao so angry at him and jumped in shock as he watched Shen Miao walk away. On the way back to the room, Guyu asked, is it that young lady does not like Biao young lady, otherwise why would one be so angry? Yes, I do not like. Shen Miao rubbed her forehead. She really hated Jing Chu. Towards such a proud person like Shinqiu, to make him break his leg, wear a green hat and finally be imprisoned on a murder charge, she could not wait to peel off Jing Chu's skin for this kind of snake and scorpion-hearted female. But Shinqiu was a kind person and did not know that a person's heart would be bad to such an extent. Seeing that in this lifetime Shinqiu was almost bewitched by Jing Chu's appearance, Shen Miao was furious. But did young lady not tell Biao young lady about second young master? Guyu said, perhaps in the future Biao young lady's interest would turn towards second young master. Just now when Shen Miao and Jing Chu were chatting, they did not deliberately avoid the few maids and Guyu could hear the meaning in Shen Miao's words. Shen Miao shook her head, she is not stupid and if she was moved by my words, she would not be Jing Chu. Shen Miao smiled gently, but it is good to have some thoughts. The few maids were somewhat baffled as they did not understand why Shen Miao would treat this timid and weak-looking Biao young lady as though she was facing a great enemy. Baoxiang Lu was the biggest money-squandering establishment in the Ding capital. If one were to say that brothels were divided into different grades, then Baoxianglu would definitely be the top in the Ding capital. Any one of the girls could be the main hostess of an ordinary brothel. Plump and thin, shrewish and gentle, cute and adorable, innocent and flirtatious. As long as one could think of it, Baoxianglu had it. Because of this, the price of the ladies in Baoxiang house was also the most expensive. The beautiful young ladies at the door waved their fragrant handkerchiefs to welcome the guests. A male wearing armor walked in and it made the few young ladies to look at him a few more times. Those who could afford to come to Baoxianglu were either rich or noble, and most of them were young masters of wealthy families or officials. But this male in front did not seem to be from a wealthy family, and the baleful aura on him made the young ladies retreat. Until a middle-aged Sun Yang dressed in red walked out and smiled when she saw him. "Gentleman Mo is here again? Are you still looking for Luing today?" Mo Qing nodded his head and took out a banknote from his bosom and handed it to the other party. When that female received the banknote, she smiled in satisfaction. "Gentlemen, follow me in and one will bring you upstairs. Luing has been waiting for you these few days." Mo Qing suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and calmly followed this person upstairs. Chapter 299. Baoxianglu's young ladies were the most expensive and similarly, Baoxianglu's young ladies were also the best. Even though Luing was not considered as the leading hostess in Baoxianglu, she was considered to be a beauty, but this was only relative to the rumors outside. In fact, Baoxianglu would have new young ladies coming in every day and every one of them had good looks and talents. Males were fond of the new and tired of the old, so the number of guests that came to look for Luing had decreased by a lot. But recently the young ladies in Baoxianglu knew that Luing, who was somewhat deserted, had a big business recently, as a young male would come to look for her every 3 to 5 days. In Baoxianglu, it was very rare for a guest to only pick one young lady at a time. Everyone guessed that this was to redeem Lu Ying's freedom. Mo Qing followed that female to a small building upstairs and the red-clad female withdrew with a smile. On the soft couch, a young female was dressed in a light red muslin robe as she reclined and hugged a zither. Her watery eyes were filled with affection and there was an ambiguous smile on her lips. Her clothes revealed half of her shoulders, making one's imagination run wild. Mo Qing took a deep breath and looked straight ahead as he walked to the table to sit down. He poured a cup of tea for himself and started his day's itinerary, in a daze. The sound of the zither abruptly stopped and Luing had a flustered and exasperated look on her face. She walked to Mo Qing and said angrily, "Gentleman Mo had come a few times and turned a blind eye to Luing. Could it be that you are playing with Luing? Or is it that Lu Ying's body is dirty?" The sisters were all envious that she was able to make it big because there was a male who was willing to pick her alone, but no one knew that this male was good-looking but useless. No matter what tricks he used, this person would not even take a look at him, not to mention anything else. Mo Qing shook his head but did not speak as he stared straight at the teacup in front of him. But his heart was extremely helpless. What Shen Miao said was indeed right. This Luing was indeed a flirtatious female. Previously when she used methods to tease him, Mo Qing himself was somewhat unable to control himself. Now sitting here for another moment was torture, but Shen Miao wanted him to continue sitting like this. The angrier Luing got, there was a seductive smile on her face. She simply sat on Mo Qing's thighs and hooked her hands around the other's neck before whispering into Mo Qing's ears, "Gentleman Mo, are you willing to let me sit like this?" With a "pa" sound, it was Mo Qing who pushed Luing onto the ground. Situated in the Kuaihua Lu opposite Baoxianglu, in one of the elegant rooms, the table was filled with a dazzling array of jade plates and musical instruments, with 3 people sitting in the middle. A man who looked like a guard walked in from outside and bent his head to whisper a few words into the ears of the purple-clothed youth sitting in the middle. Speaking of which, Ji Yushu spoke in puzzlement, why did Shin young lady let her own guards go to Baoxianglu to look for young ladies? Moreover, this guard only watches and doesn't eat, Gao Yang added. Towards Shen Miao, Gao Yang and Ji Yushu no longer treated her as an ordinary young lady of a military family. Everything that she did seemed to have a deep meaning. Thus when they knew that Shen Miao sent Mo Qing to Baoxiang Lu to look for young ladies, both of their first reaction was that Shen Miao was planning to scam someone again. Bai Shaoxing's people went out to observe for several days in a row, and the thing that made one's teeth drop was that the guard picked Lu Ying but did not do anything and just sat in Lu Ying's room for a night before leaving. They carefully inquired about Lu Ying's background, and she was just a prostitute that was sold to a brothel. There was nothing special, so they did not understand the deep meaning of Shen Miao's actions. Could it be that she wants to groom a eunuch as a confidant? Ji Yushu's thoughts were exceptionally strange. Now it is to let that guard adapt to the life of a eunuch in advance. Your thoughts are always so wonderful. Gao Yang muttered, I see that she wants to win over Lu Ying. Perhaps it is to deal with the other two households of the Shen family. But there is no need to look for Lu Ying, as there are more young ladies in Baoxiang Lu who are more seductive than Lu Ying. He looked at Xie Jingxing. Third Xie, what do you think of this matter? Chapter 300. Xie Jingxing was looking out of the window, and when he heard that, he lazily glanced at the two of them and said, You two are very free? In any case you have some friendship with Shen young lady, could it be that you do not care a little? Ji Yushu said, Third Xie older brother, you are smart so you must know. I don't want to know. Xie Jingxing interrupted him, I need to go out of the city for a while. Is it because of the Jade Rabbit Festival? Gao Yang asked with a frown. The emperor plans to let old Xie go to battle at the beginning of spring. Xie Jingxing said, One cannot wait. The old Xie that he was talking about was naturally the Marquis of Linan, Xie Ding. Gao Yang was silent for a while before he said, If that's the case, I'm afraid we won't have enough time. Heard that recently Shen Yuan and Prince Ding are very close. Xie Jingxing's lips hooked up. It seems that they are preparing to deal with the first household of the Shen family. Shen young lady is going to be unlucky again. Ji Yushu was somewhat surprised. Why does she always provoke these people with bad intentions? That Prince Ding is not a good person. Which person who was targeted by Prince Ding would have a good ending? Prince Ding is an unfathomable person. Gao Yang frowned. Even though he does not seem to be interested in power, his private military strength is no less than others. Shen Xian has military power in his hands, and an ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. The Shen family has a large business and is already feared by the imperial family. If Prince Ding were to take action, one fear that Shen Xian would be greatly injured. Is not Shen young lady in danger? Ji Yushu looked at Xie Jingxing. Third Xie older brother, how do you want to help her? Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows. Why should I help her? You are not temporarily considered as friends. Ji Yushu's eyes widened. Did you not save her previously? You don't intend to help Miss Shen? Xie Jingxing looked at him with a smile that was not a smile. His eyes were as deep as a pool of water, and it was obvious that he had an extremely romantic look, but the words that he spoke had a kind of cold indifference. I need the Shen family to help me delay time. It is good for Prince Ding to deal with Shen Xian. Ji Yushu sucked in a breath of cold air. Prince Ding's residence in the Ding capital. The young man on the high seat was dressed in a light-colored luxurious robe. His appearance was cold, but when he spoke to the people below him, he was extremely amiable, and his coldness melted a little. This person was not anyone else but Prince Ding, Fu Xiu-yi. At this moment there were a few strangers sitting in the hall, and these people were the advisors of Prince Ding, Fu Xiu-yi. He knew how to use people well and knew how to be courteous to the wise. If it was an ordinary prince, although they would give money and land to their advisors, they would not have the same respect as him. Not only would they be on equal footing with him, when they spoke, they would also be extremely respectful. It was because of Fu Xiu-yi's attitude that he was able to attract many wise people. It was because of these wise people that Fu Xiu-yi's schemes and grand plans were still kept in the dark, including Emperor Wenhui. The young man sitting in the middle was dressed in blue. His appearance was somewhat out of place among these advisors because he was too young. He stood up and Fu Xiuyi asked, Shen Yuan, what do you think? You can say it. Shen Yuan cupped his hands towards Fu Xiuyi. When he just entered officialdom, he secretly became Fu Xiuyi's person. Fu Xiuyi was a person who knew how to recruit talents, and Shen Yuan had talent and ambition, and was able to endure the loneliness of being outside, thus Fu Xiuyi thought highly of him. Shen Yuan said, now everyone is secretly fighting for military strength, and whoever has military strength will have more chips. Ming Qi's current military strength is Xia in the south and Xian in the north. Even though the Xia family's military strength is strong, but His Majesty let the Marquis of Lin and go into battle at the beginning of spring, so there must be a plan. The Xia family cannot be moved, but the Shen family is different. Shen Yuan paused before continuing. Shen Xian took the initiative to stay in the capital for half a year, and there are a number of people who want to win Shen Xian over. There are too many variables in the Shen family's army, and if one is unable to obtain it, it would be better to destroy it. If one were to take a gamble, perhaps it would be in line with His Majesty's intentions and also allow His Highness to prove that there are no other ambitions. Shen Yuan himself was a member of the Shen family but kept saying Shen family. It was obvious that he did not put himself and Shen Xian together. His words were obviously targeted at Shen Xian. Fu Xiuyi looked at him with a smile, perhaps he understood but pretended not to know. After all, Shen Yuan's words to him only had advantages and no disadvantages. He said, what you said is indeed correct, but the Shen family is currently unable to find a single loophole. Even if one were to find a loophole, there is no reason. Shen Yuan did not speak. Fu Xiuyi's eyes flashed and his tone became more amiable, but since you are in the Shen residence, you must know some things that ordinary people do not know. He looked at Shen Yuan, if this time the Shen family can be controlled, your credit would be the biggest. After obtaining the assurance that he wanted to hear, Shen Yuan then respectfully spoke, replying to Your Highness, this official's people were mixed in the troops long ago. Previously, when the Shen family's army was fighting in the northwest region, there were some things that were not in line with the rules. At the moment the evidence is still being collected, and once the evidence is complete, this official would definitely present it with both hands. This official guarantees that even if this time the Shen family's army is not completely collapsed, at least it would be a big blow to their vitality. Fu Xiuyi smiled faintly, then one would have to trouble you. Shen Yuan bowed his head and smiled. Chapter 301. This new year in the Shen residence was very lively. Originally, because of Ren Yun's and Shen Qing's matter, the atmosphere in the general residence was low, but with the arrival of Jing Chu and Jing Guansheng, old Shen Furen was very enthusiastic. She often let the siblings walk around the general's residence, and Shen Yu was someone who was used to dealing with people, so it did not take long for her to address Jing Chu as good sisters, but no one knew if it was sincere or not. Even though Shen Yu treated Jing Chu and her sister well, the place that the siblings loved to run to was the western courtyard of the Shen residence. Especially Jing Chu, she would often send pastries and food to the people who were practicing swordplay. With the previous lesson, when she came back later on, she would bring everyone's portion of soup, but the taste of this soup was much inferior compared to what Shen Miao made previously. Those lowly soldiers were straightforward people, and their hearts were all thinking about the soup that Shen Miao made and did not show much gratitude towards Jing Chu's attentiveness. It was the same today. After Jing Chu brought the food over, Shen Qiu did not speak much with her and wanted to continue practicing swordplay when Jing Chu called him, Biao older brother, Biao younger sister better return earlier. Shen Qiu laughed heartily, those who practice swordplay are all rough people. Blades and swords have no eyes, and it would not be good if one accidentally hurt you. Moreover, you run over here all day and you are a young lady, it is not a good thing to watch us men practice swordplay. It was actually a tactful order to chase the guest away. Jing Chu's face suddenly turned red and she looked at Shen Qiu incredulously. Her eyes were rippling as if she would cry in the next moment. When an ordinary male saw her actions, one feared that they would have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. It was just that Shinchio was never one to appreciate beautiful women and just stood there and did not want to go forward to comfort her. Seeing Shin Miao like this, Jing Chu Chu's originally red face suddenly turned white. She hurriedly lowered her head and picked up the basket. Chu Chu understands. She lifted the corner of her skirt and trotted away. Those who did not know would think that Shinchio did something to her. After Jing Chu Chu left, a person appeared behind the pillar. Shin Miao said, "Eldest brother, you really do not know how to cherish flowers." He. Shinchio scratched his head. Am I not afraid that younger sister will be angry? Why should I be angry? Shin Miao said lightly. Shinchio instantly felt a gust of cold wind blowing past as he said, younger sister does not like Biao younger sister, right? I don't have any grudges with cousin, why wouldn't I like it? Shin Miao asked. Jiao, did that girl secretly bully you? Shin Xian, who had just finished practicing his swordplay, also walked over and just happened to hear Shinchio and Shin Miao's conversation and said, if she bullied you, do not speak and beat her. What nonsense are you talking about? Luo Shuiyan saw that they were talking excitedly and also walked over. When she heard what was said, she glared at Shin Xian. Jiao, do not listen to your father's nonsense. How can a young lady casually make a move? If she bullies you, go back and tell me, and I'll beat her up for you. Isn't that still a beating? Shinchio muttered. Let me do it. I'm young and strong. Shin Miao said, she did not bully me. Then why don't you like her? Luo Shuiyan asked. Even a slow person would be able to see that Shin Miao did not like Jing Chu Chu. As long as Jing Chu Chu came over, Shin Miao would let Shinchio demonstrate piercing darts in the courtyard. Piercing darts was actually somewhat cruel, and in general Shin Xian and the rest would not do it in the residence as they were afraid of scaring the maids. They would find some lively little animals to be live targets as the bloody scene was not good to look at. And every time Jing Chu Chu came over, Shin Miao would say, Father, eldest brother, I want to see piercing darts. Every time Jing Chu Chu would be scared till her face turned pale, but she would unswervingly stand by her side and would often feel disgusted after watching. Shin Miao was never tired of it, as if she felt comfortable when Jing Chu Chu felt disgusted. Over time, everyone in the courtyard could see that Shin Miao was deliberately messing with Jing Chu Chu. Chapter 302. Shin Xian and the rest did not understand, but when they saw Shin Miao throwing a temper, they thought that it was most likely a disagreement between young ladies. As men, it was not good for them to directly intervene in young ladies' matters, so they let Shin Miao do as she wished. Most likely she was very curious today and could not help but ask. It is not that I do not like her. Shin Miao said. Just as the words were spoken, Jing Zhe, who was at the side, spoke. Young lady like to be quiet. That Biao young lady and Biao young master would often come over to talk to young lady, especially Biao young master who would chat with young lady. Young lady do not like to talk to strangers, so it seems that she is somewhat annoyed. Jing Zhe said those words with a serious expression and Shin Miao could not help but turn back to look at her. Shin Xian's and Luo Shuiyan's expression suddenly changed. On the surface Jing Zhe's words seemed that Shin Miao was annoyed with the Jing siblings, but in fact there were many meanings in her words. A Biao young master would often come over to talk to Biao younger sister and had some skills in pestering others. Luo Shuiyan said angrily, what exactly does your nephew mean? Furen, quell your anger. Shin Xian quickly comforted and then said to Shinchio, Brat, you have arranged so many guards in the courtyard but did not discover that your younger sister is pestered by those cats and dogs every day? Shinchio felt wronged. I really did not discover it. Naturally Shinchio would not be able to discover it because the places that Jing Guanxing chose to meet with Shin Miao were not in the courtyard, or at the residence's entrance, or in the garden or in the corridor. In short, one could meet anywhere at any time. Go and guard the courtyard entrance for me. If you see those two siblings again, just say that the courtyard is closed for sword practice and no one is allowed to enter." Shen Xian roared. Shen Qiu immediately went to pick people. Luo Shuiyan touched Shen Miao's head. "Jiao Jiao, in the future if that person comes to pester you again, do not be polite with them. Beat him up." Shen Xian, after Luo Shuiyan and Shen Xian returned to the sword practice grounds, Shen Miao then lightly swept a glance at Jingzhe. "You talk too much." This servant knows her mistake, but young lady, Jingzhe lowered her head, "It is obvious that Biao young master has ill intentions towards you and you have already seen it. Why did you not tell master and Furen? Jing Guansheng is an astute person." Shen Miao smiled gently. "It is a pity for an astute person to be crippled like this. I still have use for this person." However, she changed the topic. "After what you've said today, I think some things will speed up. Let's wait and see." Ever since Shen Qiu instructed people to place a group of guards at the western courtyard's entrance, to strictly guard against Jing Chu Chu and Jing Guansheng, the western courtyard became much quieter. Without the two siblings disturbing her, Shen Miao was much more at ease. However, while it was peaceful on their end, some people were anxious. In Rongjing Tang, old Shen Furen's sharp eyes stared at Jing Chu Chu, as if the previous affection was just an illusion. She said, "Chu Chu, what exactly did you do? Why can't I even enter the eldest master's courtyard now?" Jing Chu Chu lowered her head somewhat angrily and said softly, "One do not know why but fifth younger sister seems to be very guarded against me. Biao older brother actually treats me very well but fifth younger sister would make him alienate me." The guards at the courtyard entrance were also set up by fifth younger sister. "It is fifth girl again." Old Shen Furen was so angry that her face turned green. Zhang Mama, who was beside her, quickly patted her chest and comforted, "Old Furen, please calm down. That girl is so smart. Forget about your older brother, now even you are guarded to this extent. I am angered to death." Old Shen Furen's original intention was to hope that Jing Guansheng and Jing Chu Chu would deal with Shen Miao and Shen Qiu respectively. But Shen Miao was after all a female, and in matters between men and women, once something happened, the one to suffer would always be the female. With Shen Xian's and Luo Shuiyan's violent temper, one could not predict what would happen. If it was Shen Qiu, the one to suffer would be Jing Chu Chu, as the reason would always be on their side. In the past, the people of the western courtyard were carefree and they were all people who fought on the battlefield and would never fuss over these small matters. Those who were used to holding swords and spears would not pay attention to such small matters. Who knew that this time the western courtyard's style of doing things had changed and they directly locked the courtyard doors. Chapter 303. Old Furen. Zhang Mama muttered, "Fifth young lady's attitude, one fear that she is already suspicious of Biao young lady. One fear that it would be somewhat difficult to proceed step by step." When Jing Chu Chu heard this, her heart was even more ashamed and angry. She felt that she was born beautiful and intelligent, and in her generation in Suzhou, even the gentleman Wang's son would eat her soft and weak appearance. Who knew that she would hit a wall here in Shenqiu, and one did not know how sullen her heart was. "Your meaning is?" Old Shen Furen frowned. "Severe illness requires strong medicine." Zhang Mama reminded, "If this continues to drag on, it would be too late after eldest master has decided which noble young lady's marriage with eldest young master." Old Shen Furen quivered and immediately said, "What you said is right. By that time, it would be too late." She looked at Jing Chu Chu and a loving smile appeared on her face, but that smile in the eyes of others was completely fake. She said, "Chu Chu, do you want to marry Qiu or not?" Jing Chu Chu hung her head down and said, "Want." "In order to marry Qiu, are you willing to do anything?" Jing Chu Chu was surprised for a moment and vaguely guessed something, and her heart could not help but jump up. She was able to handle the affairs of males with ease, and her delicate and pitiful posture made her able to easily hook the hearts of the young masters of wealthy families in Suzhou. But the Shin family was the residence of the formidable great general, and Shin Qiu was the son of the formidable great general. Naturally she was moved. Even though she had never done such a thing before, but after hearing old Shin Furen's words, it was as if a lot of shining gold and silver appeared in front of her. She clenched her fists and softly said, "Chu Chu is willing." Old Shin Furen smiled in satisfaction. For the next few days, the Shin residence was much quieter. Jing Chu Chu and Jing Guanxing stayed in the courtyard at the back of Rong Jing Tang, and no one knew what they were fiddling about in the house, but did not go out at all. On this day, when Shin Miao went out to the corridor, she coincidentally met Jing Chu Chu. Jing Chu Chu was wearing a moon-white lined jacket and an emerald-colored skirt, looking like a pretty daughter of a humble family. In the Ding capital, this kind of young lady from Suzhou had a unique flavor, enough to make passers-by stop. Fifth younger sister. Jing Chu Chu bowed to her. Shin Miao smiled gently. "Where is Biao older sister going?" It was rare for Shin Miao to speak to Jing Chu Chu, and Jing Chu Chu was surprised for a moment before saying, "Return to the room to do some embroidery." She shyly lowered her head. "Anyway, there is nothing to do." "Since there is nothing, then why not go out with me?" Shin Miao said, "I am just about to go to the jewelry shop to pick some jewelry. If you do not mind, you can also go and pick together." Jing Chu Chu was really stunned this time. Shin Miao had always treated her lukewarm, and no matter how she tried to get close to her, it was not possible. But today, for the first time, she was willing to bring her out. Jing Chu Gu Tong, master of Tong Tong Fang, had seen and fangs that Wu Miao Long Wu. But when he heard that Shin Miao was going to a jewelry shop, his eyes immediately lit up. She carefully sized up Shin Miao. Shin Miao was wearing a snow-green colored crane embroidered cloud embroidered skirt, and on her upper body was a xiang-colored armor. She always wore dark colors, but it did not make her look old-fashioned at all. Instead, it made her complexion look like jade and had a pressing noble air. Jing Chu Chu was secretly jealous in her heart. She thought that her appearance was not inferior to Shin Miao's, but when she stood with Shin Miao, she inevitably felt ashamed of her inferiority. Shin Miao was naturally noble, and with one look, one could tell that she came from a small family. The more one was jealous, the more one would yearn. Jing Chu Chu's gaze landed on the lotus flower pearl hairpin on Shin Miao's head. That pearl was big and round, and the slightly flickering luster almost dazzled Jing Chu Chu's eyes. She quickly lowered her head, so that her greedy eyes would not be seen by the other. Jing Chu Chu said, "Since fifth younger sister has no one to accompany, then I will go along." Chapter 304. Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang walked behind, and a trace of contempt flashed in their eyes at the same time. She was after all from a small family, and her eyesight was very shallow. Just a little jewelry was able to lead her by the nose. No wonder Shin Miao said that Jing Chu Chu was not a person to be feared. Both of them left the residence and rode the horse carriage towards the Ding capital. Shin Qiu naturally let a group of guards follow, and it was very impressive. When they reached the treasure pavilion, Shin Miao casually picked a few jewelry, but it was Jing Chu Chu who held one and touched that one. She was so fond of it that it made the shopkeeper somewhat cast sidelong glances. In all fairness, Jing Chu Chu's looks were not bad, especially the Suzhou females were born soft like water, which was different from the females in the capital. But this small family style had greatly reduced her beauty. After all, one could not just rely on one's face to be popular in the Ding capital. Seeing Jing Chu Chu like this, Shin Miao was not stingy and paid for the few items that she fancied. Jing Chu Chu felt that she was much closer to Shin Miao, and when it was nearing noon, Shin Miao said, "Let us eat outside today. After picking for the entire morning, one is somewhat hungry. Most likely you have not come to Kuai Hualu in the Ding capital, as ordinary people do not have such good fortune." Jing Chu Chu looked at the grand restaurant in front of her and there was some yearning in her eyes. Today Shen Miao was picking jewelry and buying fabrics, and Jing Chu Chu had never seen such extravagant spending before, so for a moment she felt dizzy. It was because of this that she felt that the Shen residence was wealthy and was determined to enter the Shen family. When they reached the restaurant and sat down, Shen Miao picked a seat by the window on the second floor. The waiter reported some dishes and Shen Miao picked a few. The few dishes that she ordered were all Kuai Huolu's signature dishes, which made Jing Chu Chu stunned. After the waiter left, Shen Miao then said to Jing Chu Chu, "The people who come here to eat are all rich and noble. Many of them are high-ranking officials in the Ding capital and must not be underestimated." Jing Chu Chu nodded her head repeatedly. Shen Miao gently smiled and picked up the tea to drink, but her hand accidentally shook and the teacup fell onto her body and most of the tea splashed onto her skirt. Jing Chu Chu jumped in shock. "Fifth younger sister." "Nothing." Shen Miao waved her hands and stood up. "There is a place to change clothes here and there are still some clothes in the carriage. I will go and change now, wait for me here." Finishing, he called out to Bai Lu and Shuangjiang, "Let's go." When she left, those Shen residence's guards also followed and Jing Chu Chu quickly shouted, "Fifth younger sister, these guards." She was still somewhat afraid. "Don't worry. In broad daylight, no one would dare to make things difficult for you," Shen Miao said. "Moreover, the guests here are all people of status and would not do anything." Her expression was gentle but her tone was unquestionable. Jing Chu Chu subconsciously did not refute, and by the time she recovered to her senses, Shen Miao had already brought the group of guards far away. Jing Chu Chu's expression darkened. Shen Miao would always have a high and mighty attitude in front of her, and this kind of attitude made Jing Chu Chu clearly aware of the disparity between her and herself, making her feel even more unreconciled. Moreover, she heard from the people of the Shen residence that Shen Miao was previously a stupid and ignorant idiot. Why was it that a person who did not know anything about the four arts was able to occupy the position of the daughter of the first household of the Shen family? Shen Xian and wife were also obedient to her and even let Shen Miao pick first without a second word when His Majesty bestowed them. One would always be jealous because of comparison, and now when Jing Chu Chu looked at Shen Miao, she was so jealous that she went crazy. She picked up the teacup in front of her but copied Shen Miao's actions and sipped it in small mouthfuls, as if by doing so, she would be able to get some of Shen Miao's air of nobility. Just at this moment, a group of people walked past her and sat down at the table beside her. The person at the front was a young man who was refined and dressed in brocade clothes. Even the servants behind him were dressed in exquisite fabrics. Chapter 305. Thinking of what Shen Miao said just now, "Those who come here are either rich or noble," Jing Chu Chu's heart suddenly moved. That young man also seemed to have noticed her and looked over. When he saw Jing Chu Chu's appearance, his eyes could not help but brighten. Jing Chu Chu's white coat matched with a small emerald skirt, snow-white skin and flower-like appearance. The most important thing was that gentle and timid manner. When she looked at that young man, she quickly lowered her head in shock. Most of the females in the Ding capital were in the imperial city, so they were generous and decent in their actions, but it was rare to see such a delicate and timid Jiangnan young lady. That young man's eyes were somewhat dazed, and the more eager his gaze was, the deeper Jing Chu Chu's head lowered. Time slowly passed by and the dishes were all served, but Shen Miao did not come over for a long time, so there was only Jing Chu Chu sitting alone at the table. It was not good for her to eat alone, so she held the teacup and took small sips, looking somewhat at a loss as to what to do. Finally, that wealthy gentleman at the neighboring table could not bear it any longer, and under everyone's eyes, he walked over and sat opposite Jing Chu Chu and asked softly, "Seeing that young lady has been waiting here for a long time, is it because you are waiting for someone?" Jing Chu Chu jumped in shock, and when she raised her head to see the other person, her face immediately turned red and she lowered her head to whisper, I am waiting for my Biao younger sister." That gentleman asked with concern, Why is young lady's Biao younger sister still not here? How can young lady be left alone? Jing Chu Chu blushed and shook her head, as if she wanted to say something but dared not say it. In the eyes of others, it was as if she was being bullied. That gentleman's heart settled and said, since I have nothing to do, why not wait here with young lady? No need to trouble. Jing Chu Chu quickly said, there is no need for gentlemen to, no harm. That person said with a smile, you are sitting here alone and if someone with ill intentions were to come over, one fear that there would be a lot of trouble. It would be better for me to accompany you here. His words were gentle and there was a refined smile on his face, making it easy for others to have a good impression of him. Jing Chu Chu lowered her head and said, many thanks to gentlemen. Young lady does not look like someone from the Ding capital. He asked. I am from Suzhou. Jing Chu Chu said. Both of them spoke one sentence at a time. That young person was very good with words and with just a few sentences, he coaxed Jing Chu Chu to smile. Even though she looked somewhat shy, her attitude towards that person gradually became closer. That young person talked about his own anecdotes and it seemed that he had been to many places and his family was quite rich. As such, Jing Chu Chu's smile deepened. In another private room of Kwai Hua Lu, one could see Jing Chu Chu's table clearly through the carved window. Bai Lu said, Biao young lady can actually talk for so long with an unknown man. Her words were filled with disdain. That's not an ordinary man. Shen Miao supported her chin with one hand and said lightly. Does young lady know that gentleman? Shuang Jiang asked curiously. The guards in the room were also somewhat astonished. Shen Miao left Jing Chu Chu alone there and changed a place to sit alone. It seemed that it was to let Jing Chu Chu talk to that male. Now listening to Shen Miao's meaning, she knew that male. Shen Miao smiled gently but did not speak. I say. At the other end, in one of the rooms in Kwai Hua Lu, Ji Yushu's eyeballs almost fell out. Could it be that she knows Sun Kai Nan? Even though Sun Kai Nan is Sun Tianzhang's only son, he did not enter officialdom and was raised in the residence as a prodigal son who only knew how to eat, drink and play. He did not even go to Guangwentang before, so how did Shen Miao know him? Gao Yang glanced at him. Chapter 306. Could it be that you believe that this is a coincidence? Ji Yushu said agitatedly, how is this a coincidence? Even a fool can see that Shen young lady deliberately let Sun Kai Nan meet her Biao older sister who came out of nowhere. When did I say it was a coincidence? Gao Yang unfolded his folding fan with a pa sound and waved it, but I think she not only knows Sun Kai Nan, she even knows which seat Sun Kai Nan likes to sit in. Don't you find it strange? Gao Yang touched his chin. Shen Miao is just an unmarried young lady, but why does it seem that she is more powerful than you, Bai Shaosheng? She knows everything we know and don't know. I really wonder if she knows anything we don't know. Stop slandering Bai Shaosheng. Ji Yushu retorted, Shen young lady is not an ordinary person. You and I have been monitoring young Miss Shen's whereabouts all day. If Xie Sengu were to find out, he would definitely scold us for being too idle. Spying on her is much more interesting than other things. Gao Yang looked at Jing Chu Chu who was chatting happily with Sun Kai Nan outside and asked, why don't you guess what is her motive for doing this? Ji Yushu seriously thought about it. She wants to be a matchmaker for Sun Kai Nan and her Biao older sister. When have you ever seen Shen Miao so kind? Gao Yang did not hesitate to pour cold water on him. Then tell me what is going on. Ji Yushu was discouraged. Does the minister of the Ministry of Personnel have any dealings with the Shen family recently? Gao Yang propped his chin with his fan and pondered. In Kwai Hua Upper Building, Jing Chu Chu and Sun Kai Nan talked for a long time, and the more they talked, the more congenial they became. If one did not know, one would think that they were a pair of celestial couple. After a while, one saw a few Shen residence guards walking to Jing Chu Chu's side and said, "Biao young lady's clothes do not fit," and had lost her interest. She had already paid the shopkeeper and left first. "Please ask your subordinates to protect Lady Biao. After Lady Biao finishes eating, send Lady Biao back to the mansion." Jing Chu Chu was somewhat surprised. "Fifth younger sister went back first?" The guard nodded. "How can fifth Shen young lady leave you alone like this?" Sun Kai Nan felt it was unfair. He already knew from Jing Chu Chu's mouth that the Biao younger sister that he was waiting for was the fifth young lady of the Shen residence, Shen Miao. Sun Kai Nan did not know much about Shen Miao and only knew that she was an idiot that chased after Prince Ding. Now it seemed that not only was Shen Miao an idiot, she also liked to bully others. He wanted to be someone who had tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex, so how would Jing Chu Chu waste his kind intentions? She immediately hung her head down and said uneasily, "Then I will return now." "Sigh, how can we do that?" Sun Kai Nan immediately said, "If we go back now, wouldn't it be a waste of this table full of good dishes? Kuai Hualu's wine and dishes have never been thrown away like this before." He looked at Jing Chu Chu, who was at a loss, and said with a smile, "How about this? If young lady does not mind, this one is willing to accompany young lady for a meal." He acted like a gentleman. "So many of your guards are here. How about they send you back after you finish eating?" This. Jing Chu Chu was somewhat at a loss. "Since we met, both of us are fated. Since we are fated, then one must not waste the fate that the heavens gave." That Sun Kai Nan opened his mouth and said with a glib tongue, "When this one saw young lady today, there was a feeling of seeing an old friend, thus one wanted to talk with young lady. One do not know if young lady is willing to give face and accept this suggestion of this one." After hesitating for a long while, Jing Chu Chu finally nodded her head hesitantly, then, "According to gentlemen's words." Both of them then started to really eat and talk together. In the faraway compartment, Shen Miao looked at that pair of people and a sneer slowly floated on her lips. She was familiar with Sun Kai Nan. In the previous lifetime, it was this person who made Shen Qiu wear a big green hat. Shen Qiu was young and impetuous and dragged a crippled leg to kill that person in one breath. But at the end, she then found out that Sun Kai Nan was the only son of the Minister of Personnel. It was because this Sun Kai Nan was ignorant and incompetent and usually relied on his mouth and good looks to hook up females everywhere. No matter if it was a young female or a woman, he would eat them all up. Sun Tianzheng was afraid that the imperial censor would report him and normally did not allow Sun Kai Nan to go out, so there were only a few people who knew Sun Kai Nan. But in this lifetime, even if Sun Kai Nan turned into ashes, she would still recognize him. Sun Kai Nan liked the weak Jiangnan females the most, otherwise he would not have the guts to sleep with Shen Qiu's woman in the previous lifetime. Shen Miao's eyes drooped down and muttered in a voice that only she could hear, "Sun Kai Nan, Jing Chu Chu, Ben Gong personally pulled up this previous lifetime's ill-fated fate for you. Do not let it down." Chapter 307. When Jing Chu Chu and Shen Miao went out, she returned alone and it seemed that she did not attract much attention in the Shen residence. But on this night, Shen Miao unexpectedly came to Old Furan's side courtyard and personally came to talk to Jing Chu Chu. Coincidentally, Jing Chu Chu was fiddling with the jewelry on the table, and among those jewelry, there was a jade bracelet that was particularly dazzling. The color was so transparent that it was almost transparent, and the entire piece of jade was of excellent quality. This jade bracelet would cost at least 100 taels of silver, and Jing Chu Chu would definitely not be able to buy it herself. But when Shen Miao was at the treasure pavilion yesterday, she bought some jewelry for Jing Chu Chu and there was no such jade bracelet. When Shen Miao entered the room, she stared at the jade bracelet and Jing Chu Chu jumped in shock before quickly putting it back into the box in a flurry. Shen Miao smiled gently. "Biao older sister's jade bracelet looks like it is not an ordinary item." Jing Chu Chu softly asked, does fifth younger sister know about this bracelet? One had seen a similar imported product but the quality was not as good as yours. Even so, at that time it was sold for 500 taels of silver. One feared that Biao older sister's bracelet would cost 1,000 taels of silver. Shen Miao casually made up a story. Even though this jade bracelet was precious, it was not worth 1,000 taels of silver. There were many better jewelry that could be bought with 1,000 taels of silver, but with Jing Chu Chu's horizons, even if she exaggerated it, Jing Chu Chu would not doubt it. But Biao older sister, this jade bracelet is so precious. Where did it come from? Shen Miao asked. One had never seen you wear it before. It is a gift from a friend. Jing Chu Chu whispered. A flash of understanding appeared in Shen Miao's eyes. Sun Kainan not only relied on his good looks and flowery words to make females happy, he was also willing to throw money. Otherwise Jing Chu Chu, who was already a deputy general's wife in the previous lifetime, would not have an affair. It was the first time they met and he gave such a big gift. For Jing Chu Chu, who had not seen the world, it would be hard for her not to be moved. It seems that this friend must treat Biao older sister very well. Shen Miao said. Jing Chu Chu's face turned red and looked at Shen Miao. What matter is fifth younger sister coming over for? Shen Miao slowly tidied up her clothes before saying, heard that Biao older sister was sent back by someone today. I met a kind-hearted young master. Jing Chu Chu was somewhat shocked. He has good intentions and I dare not refuse, but we have always abided by etiquette. Biao older sister need not be nervous. Shen Miao smiled gently. Does Biao older sister know who that person is? Jing Chu Chu was surprised. Who is it? It is the only son of the Minister of Personnel Sun Tianjing Darren, Sun Kainan. Shen Miao said. Jing Chu Chu looked at Shen Miao and her eyes were filled with surprise. Shen Miao sneered in her heart. Sun Tianjing was too strict with Sun Kainan. Sun Kainan went around seducing females but rarely revealed his identity, unless it was to bring that young lady into the residence as a concubine. Towards Jing Chu Chu, one feared that she did not reveal her true identity. Jing Chu Chu most likely thought that Sun Kainan was just a son of a rich family, and now knowing Sun Kainan's real identity, how could Jing Chu Chu, who wanted to climb up to the dragon and the phoenix, let him go? Biao older sister also know that the Minister of Personnel is a very high official. Shen Miao smiled gently. The residence is not much worse than us. The most important thing is that Sun Darren only has one son, Gentleman Sunday. For a person of his status to actually send Biao older sister back to the residence, could it be that? Shen Miao lightly said, he somewhat likes Biao older sister. Fifth younger sister do not speak nonsense. Jing Chu Chu quickly refuted, but her cheeks quickly turned red and her eyes became somewhat erratic. Obviously Shen Miao's words had caused some waves in her heart. She whispered, Gentleman Sun and I are innocent. Chapter 308. I did not say that there is anything between the both of you. Shen Miao smiled. A fair and graceful lady is a gentleman's desire. Biao older sister is born beautiful and it is natural for Gentleman Wang and Sun to be pleased. But Gentleman Sun is indeed a good person. He has a dignified appearance and a rich family background. If anyone could be his wife, they would be the matriarch of the entire Minister of State's residence. After all, Sun Darren only has this one son. Jing Chu Chu pursed her lips and did not speak. Shen Miao stood up and smiled. I only came over to casually say it. Biao older sister must not take it to heart. Most of the matters in this world depend on fate. If there is really fate, one would not know what the situation would be in the future. At that time, Biao older sister would definitely be able to stay in the Ding capital forever. Finishing speaking, Shen Miao turned around and walked out. Jing Chu Chu sat alone in the room and she subconsciously took out that smooth jade bracelet from the box and reached out to caress the lines on it. She did not think that Sun Kai-nan was actually the son of the Minister of Personnel. As for why he did not say his identity, it was most probably like what was written in the opera. He did not hope that she would be close to him because of his family background. Did this not mean that Sun Kai-nan treated her sincerely? Otherwise, why would he give out a bracelet that was worth 1,000 liang the moment they met? In all fairness, Jing Chu was after all from a small family. Even though there were many princes and grandsons chasing after her in Suzhou City, but compared to Sun Kai-nan's actions in front of her, those were just small fries. She had seen the prosperity of the Ding capital and was even more unwilling to return to Suzhou. Now Shen Miao's last sentence had moved her heart. If she were to marry Sun Kai-nan, she would be able to stay in the Ding capital forever. But what about old Shenfuren's side? Outside, Shen Miao had just stepped out of the courtyard when she met Jing Guansheng. When Jing Guansheng saw her, his eyes lit up and he smiled. "Is Biao younger sister here to see Chu Chu?" Shen Miao nodded her head. Biao younger sister is getting closer to Chu Chu now. Jing Guansheng wanted to go forward, but Jing Zhe and Gu Yu were guarding in front of him like they were guarding against lechers. Jing Guansheng was a refined person, so it was not good for him to approach with a drooling face. No harm. We are all one family. Shen Miao smiled gently and no longer looked at Jing Guansheng as she walked out of the courtyard. Gu Yu whispered, "Does young lady wish to be a matchmaker for Biao young lady and gentleman's son?" Just now Shen Miao kept on saying that Sun Kai-nan was good, and when the two maids heard it, it was exceptionally strange as they felt that it was very similar to a matchmaker. "When did you see me being so kind-hearted?" Shen Miao said expressionlessly. "Then why?" Gu Yu was even more puzzled. One must disturb Biao older sister's heart. Shen Miao smiled faintly. Old Furen and Biao older sister previously had the same goal, so both of them were naturally close, but if they did not seek the same thing, what do you think will happen? Jing Zhe was quick-witted, dog biting dog. She immediately reacted and said in a panic, "I didn't say they were dogs. I can't read, what you said is not wrong." Shen Miao said, "The saying of dog biting dog is quite good. Also, for the next few days, go and build a good relationship with Rong Jing Tang's Fuer." Fuer? Shen Miao was surprised. Old Furen wanted to marry her to the housekeeper's son who is blind in one eye. Shen Miao said, "Fuer is very unwilling." Heavens! Jing Zhe was stunned. Fuer has been by old Furen's side since young. How? Even the cats and dogs that were raised would have some feelings, so why would a young lady in her prime of life be married to a one-eyed man? Fuer did things quickly, and even though his mouth was fierce, he was loyal and devoted to old Shenfuren. Old Shenfuren had obtained the housekeeper's annual land profits, so naturally there must be some expression. If one is not willing to fork out money, then one will have to use people. One can only blame that Fuer's life is not good but was born well. Chapter 309. That young lady is planning to help Fuer? Gu Yu carefully asked, but there was a strange feeling in her heart. Shen Miao did not care much about the people of Rong Jing Tang, and now she was not a person with a bodhisattva's heart. She felt that it was somewhat impossible to help Fuer. Of course help. Shen Miao said in a calm and composed manner, "Every mistake that old Furen makes is our opportunity." Young lady want to bribe Fuer? Jing Zhe asked, "But will Fuer be bribed?" Fuer used to be the most loyal to old Furen. If loyalty is not rewarded, then the power to change sides would be greater. When the dog that is raised by one side goes crazy, then it would bite the owner the most painful. Shen Miao said lightly. For a few days, the Shen residents passed by peacefully. Jing Chu no longer hung around the western courtyard but often brought a few guards of the Shen residents out to go shopping, saying that she wanted to see the liveliness of the Ding capital. Naturally no one stopped her, and for the people of the western courtyard, they could not wait for Jing Chu to go out every day so that the guards at the entrance of the western courtyard could relax a little. But the clothes that Jing Chu Chu was wearing were getting richer by the day. Even though old Shenfuren also gave the Jing siblings money, but because of her stingy identity, she would not give too much. Jing Chu Chu was dressed in such a luxurious manner that even Xin Yu felt surprised, but when asked, Jing Chu Chu said that it was money that she brought from her own family. Even Jing Guansheng's hands were a lot more relaxed and the amount of money that he gave to the servants in the Shen residence had increased. Everyone said that it was because the Jing siblings came to the Ding capital and their horizons were broadened. The habits of a small family were also restrained and they became more like the people of the Ding capital. The Jing siblings lived comfortably, but naturally there were people in the residence who were not comfortable. In Rong Jing Tang, old Shenfuren looked at Jing Chu Chu in front of her and her eyes flashed. Chu Chu, how are you doing recently? Is there anything that you are not used to in the Ding capital? Thanks to old Furen's blessings, Chu Chu is living very well. Jing Chu Chu said. Since you are living well, then why do you not use the medicine that was given to you until now? Old Shenfuren's pair of triangular eyes stared at Jing Chu Chu and her tone was heavy. If one was timid, one would be scared to tears by her ferocious look. Jing Chu Chu however lowered her head and her voice did not change at all as she said, Old Furen, Chu Chu is currently unable to get close to Biao older brother and really cannot find a chance. Old Shenfuren had long handed the medicinal bag to Jing Chu Chu and only let her find an opportunity to drug Shenqiu. Who knew that after so many days, the Shen residence was calm and peaceful and Jing Chu Chu did not even take any action. You are loitering outside all day and only return to the residence late. It would be strange if one could find an opportunity. Old Shenfuren could not help but sneer, Chu Chu, are you not willing? If you don't want to, then forget it. Chu Chu is not unwilling. Jing Chu Chu quickly said. These days she would meet with Sun Kai Nan privately outside and she pretended not to know of Sun Kai Nan's identity. Sun Kai Nan treated her gently and gave her clothes and jewelry. It was because of these things that Sun Kai Nan gave that Jing Chu Chu hesitated in her heart. Compared to Shenqiu who had to go to the bitter cold northwestern region and not be seen all year round, marrying Sun Kai Nan was much more comfortable. But whether Sun Kai Nan was willing to marry her or not was another question. Jing Chu Chu had been guarding her innocence because she knew the disease of men, let them see but not be able to touch, touch but not be able to eat, eat until they are not full, then she would be able to firmly hook a man's heart. She had indeed made Sun Kai Nan head over heels, but Sun Kai Nan was the D-son of the Minister of Higher Officials' residence and she came from a small family. Even if Sun Kai Nan liked her, Sun Tianzheng would not agree and she was not willing to be Sun Kai Nan's concubine. Chapter 310. So Jing Chu Chu hesitated. If it was with Shenqiu, old Shenfuren guaranteed that she would be Shenqiu's official wife, but Sun Kai Nan treated her gently and generously. People's hearts were greedy and would look at what was in the pot when one ate in the bowl. Jing Chu Chu could not make up her mind and did not drug Shenqiu. She did not take action for a long time and old Shenfuren became anxious and came to question her. Since you are willing, why do not take action? Old Shenfuren asked. Chu Chu. Chu Chu want to ensure that nothing goes wrong before taking action. After all, the guards in the western courtyard are tight and it is difficult for Chu Chu to find an opportunity. If one were to alert the snake, it would be difficult to take action. Chu Chu, I like you. Old Shenfuren slowly said, but if you continue to be like this, I will be disappointed. You are so timid and in the future it would be difficult to accomplish anything. Jing Chu Chu lowered her head and agreed. Old Shenfuren looked at her and seemed to be somewhat disgusted. You go out. Jing Chu Chu hurriedly retreated out. After Jing Chu Chu left, old Shenfuren smashed the cup in front of her and said angrily, things that cannot be seen in public. Zhang Mama instructed the maid to pick up the fragments on the floor and comforted softly, old Furen need not be anxious. Most likely Biao young lady is a little timid. A young lady would have some scruples when doing this kind of thing. How can I not be anxious? Old Shinfuren said in a flustered and exasperated manner. Yuana had already said yesterday that eldest family has been looking for a young lady for Shinshio. If it is really settled, it would be impossible to take action in the future. I originally saw that Jing Chu Chu was an ambitious person, so I helped her, but who knew that mud cannot hold up a wall? Zhang Mama patted old Shinfuren's chest to calm her down. Biao young lady is still young. Moreover, what Biao young lady said is somewhat reasonable. Now eldest master's family is on guard, and if one does not beat the grass and alert the snake, it would be bad if all the faces were torn. Then what do you say? Old Shinfuren said in a bad mood. Now that time is pressing and that girl is not willing to take action, one cannot just watch Shinshio marry a noble young lady, right? Old Furen. Zhang Mama pondered for a moment. Biao young lady is young and it is somewhat risky for her to do it. Why not let our people do it? Our people? Old Shinfuren looked at her. Not bad. Mrs. Zhang said, our people will naturally be more thorough than Miss Biao. When the time comes, even if something goes wrong, we can get Miss Biao out of it and leave a way out. However, I don't think there will be any problems. This matter has been done by us in the past, so it should be as easy as flipping our hands. Old Shinfuren's eyes slightly moved and was silent for a moment before suddenly saying, what you said is not wrong. Since that girl does not dare to take action, then let others help her. Call Fuer and Xier in. Naturally, no one knew about Rong Jingtang's change in mind. However, whether or not the people who knew would spread the news was another matter. However, on the surface, everything seemed to be developing in an orderly manner. This day when Shin Miao was returning to the western courtyard, she coincidentally bumped into Shin Yuan. Ever since Jing Chu and Chu siblings came to the Shin residence, one did not know what Shin Yuan was busy with and rarely saw others. Upon returning to the Ding capital, Shin Gue was naturally unhappy that he left early and returned late. He thought that Shin Yuan was deliberately avoiding him because of Ren Wanyun's matter and quarreled with Shin Yuan a few times before parting on bad terms. It was just that these quarrels did not affect Shin Yuan as he still did not appear in the residence as usual. At the end they met here. Seeing Shin Miao, Shin Yuan slowed down his footsteps and greeted, fifth younger sister. Chapter 311. Second older brother. Heard that fifth younger sister is recently close to Biao younger brother and Biao younger sister. Shin Yuan smiled, did you just return from Biao younger brother's place? He deliberately mentioned Jing Guansheng, as if hinting that there was something between Shin Miao and Jing Guansheng. Bai Lu's and Shuang Zhang's brows wrinkled as Shin Yuan's words did not sound good. Shin Miao swept a glance at Shin Yuan and did not answer his words. It seems that second older brother just returned from second Shin's place. One heard that recently second Shin's illness has decreased a lot. Is it going to be better soon? Ren Wanyun had not appeared for a long time and all the matters of the second household were handed over to Wan Yinyang to handle. Even old Shin Furen, who had always looked down on Wan Yinyang, did not say anything. Everyone in the Shin residence was well aware that it was impossible for Ren Wanyun to be as glorious as the first half of her life. Moreover, Ren Wanyun's maiden family were only wealthy merchants and no matter how much money they had, they did not have any power and could not help much. Shin Yuan's expression paused for a moment and sized her up before smiling. Fifth younger sister's complexion looks good recently. Is there a happy event approaching? Because of the return of Shin Xian and wife, Shin Qiu would change his ways to please Shin Miao every day. The current Shin Miao was no longer that dull little girl in the past. Once her temperament was good and her complexion was good, at least no matter where she was placed, she would not be ignored by others. How would I have any good things? It is second older brother who seems to be very busy these days. Perhaps there is a good thing approaching. Shin Miao answered. Hearing that, Shin Yuan's face actually revealed an expression that could be called as happy. He said, oh. Seen through. In the past there were some troubles and bad luck, but recently second older brother is thinking of ways to disperse them. Seeing that things are going smoothly, most likely he is somewhat happy. He then looked at Shin Miao meaningfully, but fifth younger sister need not belittle yourself. I see that fifth younger sister's good thing is approaching. Shin Miao did not speak. Shin Yuan cupped his hands and said, there are still some matters and will not speak more with fifth younger sister. Farewell. Finishing, he strode away. Bai Lu said angrily, this second young master is really too impolite. Shin Yuan's hostility towards Shin Miao and those weird words that he said could be heard by anyone. Shin Miao frowned tightly and looked at Shin Yuan's back without speaking. Young lady? Shuang Jiang asked worriedly. Shin Miao said, he is somewhat strange. Shin Miao was very clear about Shin Yuan, this person. One should not underestimate him, as he seemed to be indifferent to the matters of the residence but was the most vicious and merciless one. Now Shin Miao could be sure that the previous lifetime Shin Qiu's ending was definitely related to Shin Yuan. Even though Shin Yuan did not know that Shin Miao's arrangements were already misplaced, but those words just now seemed to have revealed some information that Shin Yuan still had a backup plan. Should we let Gardemo follow second young master? Shuang Jiang suggested. No need. Mo Qing still does not have that ability. Shin Miao shook her head. Fu Xiu-yi was not to be feared, but one must be careful of the people behind Fu Xiu-yi. She said, let's wait and see. Upon returning to the western courtyard, just as one stepped into the room, one saw Gu Yu and Jing Zhe anxiously waiting in the room. Seeing Shin Miao return, Gu Yu quickly closed the door and pulled Shin Miao to the couch in the inner room to sit down before Jing Zhe softly said, young lady, Fu from Rong Jing Tang had passed a message over. How is it? Shin Miao asked. Old Furen plans to personally take action and arranged for it to happen 2 days later. Jing Zhe said angrily, Old Furen is really too bad. Master and Furen treat her so well, but she actually schemed against eldest young master. And that Biao young lady, one could tell that she is not a good person. She really does not know shame. All right. Gu Yu interrupted her, young lady, what do we do now? Chapter 312. Why 2 days later? Shin Miao asked. 2 days later is the family banquet, and coincidentally second Furen's close friend will come over to visit second Furen. Jing Zhe did not finish her words, but there was no doubt about the meaning. Old Shin Furen wanted to take advantage of the fact that there were so many people around to accuse Shin Qiu of slandering Jing Chu's innocence, and wanted Shin Qiu to give an explanation to the young lady in front of everyone. How could Shin Qiu decline? It was the same method as in the previous lifetime. Redoing it again, old Shin Furen's method was still not that brilliant. Like this, you give instructions to Fuer. Shin Miao waved her hands and let Jing Zhe's ears to whisper a few words. But one still need to find someone to keep an eye on it. Shin Miao said, this matter cannot go wrong. This servant will understand. There was a flash of eagerness in Jing Zhe's eyes, this servant will definitely do this matter well. Shin Miao smiled gently, this is a good matter. Do not mess it up for others. It is retribution to spoil one's marriage. She stretched out her 2 hands and gently knocked on the teacup in front of her. Her calm and composed appearance was like that of a high and mighty person. In the night, in a residence that was a few hundred li away from the Ding capital, there was a person sitting in the main hall. The people standing in the hall were all dressed in black robes and long boots, and their neat and uniform appearance was astonishing. The leader cupped his hands and said, this subordinate did not handle the matter well, and the news was sent back. May master punish. Enough. The young man sitting in the main seat waved his hand lazily. He was dressed in a purple robe, and the corners of his robe were embroidered with fine dragon patterns using golden thread. Under the flickering light, the golden dragon looked like it was about to soar into the sky from the flowing purple clouds. He was playing with a female hairpin in his hands, and on that handsome and charming face, even his smile had an evil air, as if he was a frivolous noble young master that walked out from a large clan. But looking at it carefully, that pair of astonishingly drunk peach blossom eyes were like ice and snow, so sober that there was not a trace of emotion. "You all cannot hide it," Xia Jingxing said. "I did not intend to hide it. It is nothing more than to fight for time. Since the news was sent back, now time is even more pressing." "Master." The leading black-clad man frowned. "The matters in the Ding capital have not been settled and time is pressing. What does Master plan to do? Do not leave any future troubles." He tilted his head and thought for a moment before casually saying, "Find a time to settle brother Xia Changwu." In any case, Xia Changwu and Xia Changchao had the same blood flowing in their bodies, but when Xia Jingxing said it, there was no trace of hesitation, as if he was dealing with a stranger or even a cat or dog. "Master?" The black-clothed man was stunned and asked hesitantly, "For so many years." "Master, why?" "In the past I could not be bothered, but now both of them are restless." Xia Jingxing said, "If I do not get rid of them, I will not be at ease when I leave." But Marquis Xia has already brought the two of them into officialdom. The man in black said, "These days, the two brothers have been following Marquis Xia closely. I heard that Marquis Xia has already introduced them to his colleagues in the officialdom and instructed them to take good care of them. It's not difficult to make a move, but it's hard to avoid alerting others." Xia Ding, this idiot. Xia Jingxing's face sunk and there was a hint of anger in his tone, unable to accomplish anything but more than spoil things. He directly called out the Marquis of Lineage's name, but the people below were not surprised at all, as if it was a very natural thing. The black-clothed man coughed lightly. "Because Master has not entered officialdom for a long time, Marquis Xia is afraid that there will be no successor, so he let the two of them take over." It was not the first or second day that Xia Jingxing's character was unruly and mischievous, and it seemed that Xia Ding was really helpless against Xia Jingxing, else with the Marquis of Lineage's mind being so biased, how would he give up Xia Jingxing and let the Xia Changwu brothers take over his mantle? "Forget it." Xia Jingxing frowned. "Delay the matter of the residence of the Marquis of Lineage. As for the residence of the princess, from today onwards, send people to secretly protect Princess Rong Xian." "Master." The black-clothed man hesitated for a moment and seemed to have made up his mind before ruthlessly saying, "Since it will be like this in the future, it is better to draw a line with Princess Rong Xian now. When is it your turn to teach me how to do things?" Xia Jingxing lightly swept a glance at him and the latter immediately kept quiet as he felt a chill down his spine. In the next moment, the voice above was heard, "Whether I do it or not is my business. Whether she appreciates it or not is her business. I have already done my utmost benevolence." His words contained a hint of indifference and ruthlessness. Coupled with his peerlessly handsome face, it gave off a kind of terror that made one shudder in fear. He stood up and the corner of his robe slightly swayed on the seat. In the flowing golden light, he said, "Act according to the plan. Fight for time in the Ding capital." One heard that Xin Yuan had already collected most of the evidence. The black-clothed man said, "One fear that after the end of the year, Xin Yuan's evidence would be completely searched and at that time the Xin family would be the first to be cut." "Quite good." Xia Jingxing shrugged his shoulders. "If Xin Yuan has any difficult matters, you can help secretly." "But Xin Yuan is Prince Ding's people," the black-clothed man reminded. "Of course I know that he is Prince Ding's people." Xia Jingxing waved his hands. "I only let the Xin family block for us." Chapter 313. The Xin family banquet was set for 2 days later. The banquet was suggested by old Xin Furen herself, but every year the banquet was handled by Ren Wanyun and this year's banquet could only be handed over to Qin Roqiu. Now that the authority of the Xin residence was in Qin Roqiu's hands, old Xin Furen felt that she had given Qin Roqiu a huge face but did not know that this job that looked glamorous on the outside was actually unspeakably bitter. In Qiu Shui Yuan, Chen Roqiu sat in front of the table with one hand holding an account book and the other clumsily working on an abacus. The two maids standing behind her spoke, "Furen, you have been calculating for the entire morning, it is better to take a break. The money does not match up." Chen Roqiu shook her head in distress. "Tomorrow this sum of money will have to be paid out of my own pocket." As she spoke, there was a trace of anger on her face. Chen Roqiu boasted that she was a noble young lady from a scholarly family and was aloof and proud, so she could not stand to be covered with the stench of money. In the beginning, when old Shen Furen handed over the authority of the Shen household to Ren Wanyun, it was not that she was not jealous, but she could not put down her face to fight for it, thus a knot was left in her heart. After so many years of hardship, she was able to become the matriarch of the Shen family, but at this time she discovered that the authority of the Shen household was not that easy to grasp. Ren Wanyun was born a wealthy merchant, and on normal days when old Shen Furen needed to spend more money, Ren Wanyun could at most deduct some from her dowry, since Ren Wanyun was not lacking in money. But the Chen family were only civil officials, and to put it nicely, they were uncorrupted, but to put it bluntly, they were poor, so how would they be able to take out more money to subsidize? Chen Roqiu thought that by taking over the authority of the Shen household, she would be able to allocate some money to subsidize the household. Now looking at it, Ren Wanyun had earned a lot over the years, and many of the money in the accounts did not match up. Now that there was going to be a family banquet, there was not enough money. It was still alright in the past, as Shen Xian's side received generous rewards from the palace and there was a lot of surplus. But now that the relationship between Shen Xian and the Shen family was stiff and there was no thought of subsidizing the public finances, Chen Roqiu only felt a headache. Obviously one knows that the public finances are not enough, but old Furen is still holding a family banquet at this time. Is this not bullying Furen? Chen Roqiu's maid Shiqing was indignant for her. The great master also intends to leave her in the lurch. Madam doesn't have enough money. Why don't you ask the master for some? Hua Yi also said. What nonsense are you talking about? Chen Roqiu said, Master's salary is not even enough to bribe the officials, how can one let him take out money? She said, let me think about what to do. Shen Wan wholeheartedly wanted to climb up the official career ladder, but Shen Gui was different. Shen Gui was too ambitious, he didn't have any abilities and only knew how to curry favor with the public. On the other hand, Shen Wan climbed up step by himself. Although his pace was slower, it was more steady than Shen Gui's. Chen Roqiu had always known that she did not give birth to a son and could only rely on Shen Wan's love for her in the second household. Therefore, in order to control Shen Wan, she had to be gentle and careful. If she could not even settle the matter of money at home, wouldn't Shen Wan be annoyed? With Shen Wan's qualifications, there were many women outside who wanted to enter the second branch. How could she let herself be at a disadvantage? Moreover, this bit of money is not for nothing. Chen Roqiu's eyes flashed, if there is some harvest, it is worth it. Furen's meaning is, Chen Roqiu smiled, it is somewhat strange for old Tai Tai to hold a family banquet at this time. Moreover, I heard that in the past few days, that Suzhou Biao young lady liked to run over to the western courtyard. As Chen Roqiu spoke, there was a trace of disgust in her eyes. Old Tai Tai's move is really inferior, but coincidentally, I also do not like Shen Qiu. Chen Roqiu did not like Shen Yuan and similarly did not like Shen Qiu. If one were to say that there was some fear towards Shen Yuan, then Shen Qiu was really looked down upon. She herself was unable to give birth to a son, so she could not bear to see other families' outstanding sons. As for Shen Qiu, Chen Roqiu only felt that he was a boorish person who only knew how to wield swords and spears, so how could he receive so many people's praises? People would want to destroy something because they could not obtain it. Shen Yuan's scheming mind was deep and she dared not make a move, but Shen Qiu was straightforward and sincere, and had never survived in the inner courtyard, so it was much easier to deal with him. The most important thing was that she did not even need to make a move. This time it was old Shen Furen who made a move, and she only needed to sit and watch the show. Chapter 314. I will go back and write a few more invitations. Chen Roqiu said, find someone to send the invitations to the various Furin's residents. It was better to have more people watching the show. 2 days later, the Shin residence's family banquet. Ever since Ren Wanyun went crazy, those noble Furins cut off all contact with Ren Wanyun. After all, it was not a glorious thing to have a young lady who got pregnant before marriage. Even though they did not know what happened to Ren Wanyun, but when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter, so no one asked about Ren Wanyun. And the Furins who were on good terms with Ren Wanyun gradually got closer to Chen Roqiu. Even though they could not interact with Ren Wanyun anymore, the relationship with the Shin residents must still be maintained. There was more than one Furin in the Shin residence. Compared to Luo Shuayan, who was not in the Ding capital all year round and had a vulgar reputation, Chen Roqiu, who came from a scholarly family, was obviously easier to fawn on. Yi Furin and Jiang Furin had arrived a long time ago, and Jiang Shaoxian and Yi Peilan pulled Xin Yu to speak. One will only go to Guangwen Tang after the end of the year. It is boring to be locked in the residence these days. They were gossiping, completely forgetting about Xinqing's death, forgetting that not long ago, they were true friends with Xinqing. The friendship between the noble females in the Ding capital was also so thin. Friends could not be compared to benefits, as one was not associating with a person, but the power behind that person. Xin Yu also smiled and responded to them. Thus Xinqing's matter was tacitly forgotten by the few of them. Bai Wei looked at the figure in the distance and said, "Hey, who is that? Is she the lady Biao you mentioned?" She raised her chin and pointed at a young girl standing not far away. She was dressed in a simple apricot-colored dress and was standing there talking to a servant beside her. "That is third younger sister, Dong Ling," Xin Yu said with a smile, "born from Yinyang. In the past she did not come out due to her poor health, so it is natural that you have not seen her before." She deliberately emphasized the word Yinyang. Hearing this, Jiang Shaoxian and the rest looked at him with disdain. Yi Peilan said, "What body not well, isn't it, coming out? These Yinyang's children are the most cunning. Yunyang, you must not be deceived by her." Xin Yu smiled, "Third younger sister does not go out of the courtyard. Look, that is my Biao older sister." As Xin Yuan was speaking, he saw Jing Chu Chu walking over from the side. Most likely she did not see Xin Yu and the rest over here and did not come over to greet them. Bai Wei's eyes were sharp. She asked with confusion, "Mother Yu, didn't you say your cousin came from Suzhou? Just now, I saw that her clothes and jewelry seemed to be very expensive. Look at the bracelet she's wearing, it's even better than the one you're wearing." Bai Wei's words were unintentional, but Xin Yu's face turned white. She forced a smile and said, "I don't know. It was probably given by grandmother. What is there to see?" Jiang Shaoxian said, "Could it be that those from Suzhou can be compared to our young ladies in the Ding capital? Clothes and jewelry can all be pretentious, but vision and temperament can't. Look at that delicate and timid look, how can she be presentable?" Xin Yu shook her head, "You all must not say that about Biao older sister. You're just too kind." Yi Peilan was exasperated that he did not live up to her expectations, getting close to just anyone, even the idiot in your Fu used to protect him. Now that he has grown up, he still doesn't put you in his eyes. Speaking of which, why did I not see that idiot? The idiot that she was talking about naturally referred to Xin Miao. Ever since Guangwen Tang and Xin Miao had a dispute, Yi Peilan had regarded Xin Miao as her #1 enemy and could not wait to step on her. And the Xin Miao that she was talking about was currently in the western courtyard watching Xin Qiu drink tea. What exactly is going on with grandmother? Xin Qiu furrowed his brows and said, "Why did you invite so many ladies to the banquet? Everywhere you go, it's so noisy."